Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Luz María López. Luz María López was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family of Arose and Brian López. She was the youngest of two children, with an older brother named Omar. In infancy, Luz María faced a life-threatening intestinal obstruction that required a complex operation. Despite the doctor's uncertainty, her mother's prayers and faith in her recovery paid off, and the surgery was successful. Fortunately, the early surgery did not affect her development. During her school years, Luz María was an active and well-rounded student. She participated in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance, and was a people person who easily made friends. She also excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After graduation, Luz María decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university, where she chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. When Luz María was a student, she accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz, to buy a motorcycle as a 25th birthday gift for her older brother. They met a polite and attentive young consultant named Jorge, who showed them various models and offered recommendations. Although Luz María and her mother chose a model, they decided to think it over and consult with the rest of the family before making a decision. Before leaving, Luz María gave Jorge her phone number in case they needed further feedback. Shortly after, Jorge called Luz María, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, their conversation turned personal. He continued to call her several times before mustering the courage to invite her to a coffee shop. It was clear that he was smitten with the beautiful brunette, but didn't know how to initiate their acquaintance. Luz María was immediately drawn to a handsome young man, and when he asked to meet, she agreed. The only potential obstacle was that he was a year younger, but that didn't deter them. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed, and they both felt an intense connection, believing they had found true love. After just a few months, they decided to take the next step and start living together. Despite their parents' disapproval, they pressed on and got married 6 months later. They kept the wedding intimate, inviting only close friends and family. However, the celebration was almost ruined on the wedding day when the banquet venue encountered an unexpected issue. The couple had to pay a significant amount of extra money to salvage the event, but they were eventually able to go ahead with the ceremony as planned. Jorge is a mysterious figure, and there is limited information available about him in the public domain. What is known is that he was born in 1996 in the town of Santa Catalina Latina, Guatemala. Jorge grew up with his brother Pablo in a low-income family, where financial struggles were a constant reality. As a result, the brothers had to make do with the basics and didn't have the luxury of nice clothes or expensive toys. Contrary to what one might expect, Jorge didn't have big aspirations or ambitions. He never made an effort to study or find a good job, and instead, he took things as they came. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, uncommunicative, and sometimes aggressive. He struggled with controlling his emotions, which made it difficult for him to form meaningful relationships or connect with the opposite sex. Despite these challenges, Jorge was determined to win the heart of Luz María, the love of his life. He went all out to impress her, and once she agreed to marry him, he was in a hurry to seal the deal, fearing she might change her mind. Luz María's parents, however, were not convinced about Jorge from the start. They had reservations about their son-in-law, although they couldn't quite put their finger on what bothered them. Despite their misgivings, they couldn't persuade their daughter to reconsider her decision to marry Jorge. After the wedding, the young couple's marriage quickly became unhappy. The wife, Luz María, got pregnant, but she couldn't find a good job because she didn't have a university degree and was inexperienced. No employer wanted to hire an expectant mother with no skills, so she had to settle for casual labor. Meanwhile, her husband, Jorge, lost his job and showed no enthusiasm for finding a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became dire. Both Jorge and Luz María were unemployed and struggling to make ends meet. They couldn't even afford to pay rent, buy food, or purchase basic household necessities. Jorge convinced Luz María that they had no choice but to move in with his parents temporarily. Luz María was initially hesitant, but with a baby to care for and no other options, she eventually agreed. Her mother, was aware of the family's problems and encouraged Luz María to return to her childhood home. But Luz María insisted that things would improve with Jorge, and there was no need to worry. Luz María's mother visited her daughter and granddaughter at her son-in-law's parents' house, but was met with a disturbing scene. Luz María was in a terrible condition, malnourished from only eating once a day. This was partly due to her in-laws not providing her with sufficient food, as they saw her as unemployed. The situation was even more concerning because Luz María was breastfeeding her baby, Alice, so her malnutrition could also harm the child's health. The lack of food was just one of the many problems Luz María faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly humiliated and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was irritated by the baby's crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. He would lash out at Luz María, throwing her child's things at her, and on one occasion, even threw a baby bottle at her, hitting Alice, who was in her mother's arms. Jorge refused to stand up for his wife and daughter, treating them as if they were strangers. His mother-in-law, convinced her daughter to take her granddaughter and move back to her parents' house. However, Jorge soon showed up, asking his wife to return and promising to get a job. She agreed, but only if their children could rent an apartment and live separately from his parents. After Luz María defended her diploma, she achieved her long-held dream. She landed a job at the city prosecutor's office, earning the respect of her colleagues with her intelligence, talent, and responsibility. As she advanced in her career, the family's financial situation significantly improved, eventually allowing them to afford a car. This improvement was entirely due to the wife's hard work, frugality, and strong reputation among her superiors. Jorge was a selfish and lazy person who relied on his wife, Luz María's income instead of working. He had a bad temper, was abusive, and controlled every aspect of Luz María's life. He wouldn't let her have friends, go out with colleagues, or even leave the house without him. He constantly checked her phone and social media, and even forbade her from using them. Jorge's behavior was extremely abusive, and he never stood up for Luz María when his relatives humiliated or physically abused her. He also used physical violence against her, treating her like his property. Despite this, Luz María repeatedly tried to leave him, but he would beg for forgiveness, and she would give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, after a violent fight, Luz María left Jorge and went to her mother's house with their 3-year-old daughter Alice. However, Jorge showed up, promising to change and claiming he had found a new job. Luz María believed him again and returned to their apartment. In mid-January 2021, Luz María called her mother, complaining about Jorge's broken promises and theft, which had left them in a desperate situation. However, Luz María stopped responding to calls and messages, which was unusual behavior for her. Her mother grew concerned and went to her workplace, only to find out that Luz María was missing. The police were informed, and a nationwide search effort began, with Jorge as the prime suspect. He denied any involvement, claiming he was also searching for his wife. However, the investigation revealed that Jorge was the last person to see Luz María alive, and he was the only suspect in her disappearance. Jorge was outraged and frustrated to be the prime suspect in his wife's disappearance, particularly since his own alibi was inconsistent and unclear. He struggled to explain why he hadn't reported her missing to the police on the day she vanished. If he thought she was at her mother's house, why didn't he call or visit her while the police were searching the area and looking for witnesses? On January 22nd, municipal workers made a gruesome discovery while responding to a call about a clogged storm drain. They found a large plastic bag containing a charred human body. Forensic experts confirmed that the body was that of a young woman. Her parents and brother identified the body as Luz María López, despite its severe disfigurement. The body was discovered near the prosecutor's office where Luz María worked. Although the area lacked surveillance cameras and lighting, pathologists were able to determine that she had suffered severe beating and died from asphyxia. The evidence included internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was alive, and caked blood particles in her nose and mouth. The investigation revealed that Luz María's husband, Jorge, was the prime suspect. A disturbing audio recording, sent anonymously by a neighbor, captured a brutal argument between the couple. The recording revealed Luz María's desperate screams and cries for help, as well as faint sobs in the background. Unfortunately, the neighbor who made the recording did not call the police or check on the source of the screams. Luz María's mother believes that if the neighbor had acted immediately, her daughter might still be alive. The recording was included in the case files, and Luz María's mother gave a powerful interview urging citizens to report incidents of domestic violence to the police rather than simply recording or filming them. Thousands of people protested across the country, demanding justice for Luz María. Although Jorge was arrested, he maintained his innocence, claiming he drove his wife to work on the day she vanished. However, security footage showed their car heading towards her workplace, but the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. At the couple's rented home, investigators found washed-out blood traces and drag marks, indicating that the brutal crime likely occurred there. This suspicion was strengthened by the discovery of microscopic fragments of burnt flesh in the trunk of the family car. A recent purchase by the couple, a double orthopedic mattress, caught the investigators' attention. Specifically, it was the dense polyethylene wrapping around the mattress that was significant. Comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to conceal his wife's burnt remains. Several neighbors reported hearing Jorge threaten and insult his wife just days before her sudden disappearance. They recalled him shouting that he would kill her if she left him, and that he would hide her body where no one could find it. Based on the evidence collected by expert criminologists and witness testimonies, the investigation has reconstructed the horrific events of the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, Jorge committed the murder, just one day after he and his wife had a violent argument. Jorge had a history of uncontrolled outbursts of anger, but this time he completely lost control. He brutally beat his wife, causing her to scream for help. The neighbors heard her cries but failed to call the police. During the beating, Jorge broke his wife's nose and inflicted a severe head injury. Afterwards, he strangled her with his bare hands and attempted to dispose of the body. To do so, he dragged her into the backyard, poured campfire liquid on her, and set her on fire. However, the intense smoke and smell of burning flesh and hair caught him off guard. The most disturbing aspect of the crime is that Jorge committed these atrocities in front of their 3.5-year-old daughter. Although she may not have fully understood what was happening, she witnessed the beating and murder, which was evident from her cries and screams that were recorded. Jorge, who had a basic understanding of forensic science from his wife's textbooks at home, attempted to cover up the crime and create an alibi. He deliberately chose a dark and secluded area without surveillance cameras to dispose of his wife Maria's body in a drainage sewer, escaping detection. The following morning, Jorge drove to Maria's workplace via their usual route, pretending to have dropped her off as he normally did every morning. Then, he began fabricating a search for his wife, contacting her co-workers, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers employed stall tactics to delay proceedings and discredit the investigation. They argued that all evidence and witness testimony was indirect and that there was no concrete proof to conclusively establish Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, citing his deep depression over being accused of killing the woman he loved and the mother of his child. However, crucial evidence came from Maria's phone, which had been in Jorge's possession since the crime. On the first day after the murder, Jorge used Maria's phone to send messages to various people, trying to create the illusion that she was still alive. Analysis of the phone's movements showed it was constantly in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense argued that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city to search for her, but this claim was weakened by the fact that he had sent messages from her phone and even called it from his own phone. Further evidence of Jorge's guilt included the bruises and scratches on his body, documented by experts in photos, which suggested that the victim had put up a struggle. A notable scratch on his neck was particularly telling. While it was not possible to find Jorge's skin cells under the victim's fingernails due to the fire, the cumulative evidence pointed to his guilt. The prosecutor sought the maximum punishment for the defendant despite several contentious issues in the case. However, the court proceedings were frequently delayed. In October 2022, the defendant was finally convicted of brutally murdering his wife. He received a 50-year prison sentence, still maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparents. They expressed that caring for their granddaughter has now become the main purpose of their lives. The case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was raised in a loving and prosperous Canadian family with 3 brothers. His parents, Bill and Susan, set a positive example and taught their children valuable life lessons. Bill worked at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and had diverse interests, while Susan managed the household and cared for her family without outside help. The whole family admired Susan, who showed equal love to all her sons. Although Brett seemed to get in trouble less often, it was because he had a talent for talking his way out of difficult situations. He was charismatic and well-liked by his peers. Brett's charm earned him many friends in school, and he went on to attend university after high school. However, he felt pressure to outdo his brothers, so he started a house painting business in the local newspaper. Initially, he did well and made his mother proud, but eventually he realized that it wasn't as fulfilling as he thought and had to drop out of university to focus on it. As his brothers graduated and found jobs, Brett stayed behind with his parents and younger brother, accumulating debt and struggling with depression. By 2007, his debt had reached $60,000, and he struggled to manage his finances, hiding his troubles behind volunteer work and kindness. Desperate and broke, Brett decided to rob a bank on October 28, 2007. He disguised himself with old clothes, a hat, and a scarf that covered his face, and limped into the bank on the outskirts of his neighborhood. After threatening a bank employee, he left with just over $1,000, realizing he would need to rob many more banks to settle his debts. After his first robbery, he was worried that the police would catch up with him, so he avoided going home for a few days. He told his mother he had a job in a nearby town and spent his nights sleeping in his car, periodically sneaking back to his house to check if the police were watching. Fortunately, everything seemed quiet, and no one was looking for him, which made him feel like he was doing things right. As he continued to rob banks, Brett changed his appearance each time. He stopped wearing his old clothes and instead bought second-hand ones or found them in the trash. After each heist, he would burn the clothes he wore. He also bought a fake beard from a costume store to disguise himself. The bank employees he threatened always remembered the bearded man, which helped to create a false identity. The Toronto newspapers wrote about the bearded robber, but Brett never made a large sum of money from his crimes. The most he stole was $3,000. Eventually, his luck ran out, and the police spotted his car on surveillance cameras, following him all the way home. By then, they still didn't have concrete evidence to prove his guilt, so they decided to keep an eye on the suspect. For 15 days, Brett didn't commit any robberies, which was unusual since he typically struck every 3 or 4 days. The police were starting to think they had the wrong guy and were wasting their time. However, their luck changed when Brett left his house, got into a car, and later got out near a bank wearing a disguise. He entered the bank, stayed for a bit, and when he tried to exit, the police were waiting to arrest him. After months of searching, they finally caught the notorious bearded robber. Brett was investigated for 7 months and charged with armed robbery. Interestingly, despite having a permit to carry a gun, Brett never brought a weapon with him during his robberies, not even a kitchen knife. Brett was arrested and faced 19 charges, leading to a prison sentence. He, along with his family, filed multiple appeals, which resulted in 11 charges being dropped. Once eligible, Brett applied for parole and submitted a petition. In it, he explained that he had committed the crimes while struggling with severe depression, resulting from 2 failed relationships and significant debt. Brett emphasized that he had not used weapons and had no intention of harming anyone during the crimes. The parole board accepted his remarks, but required him to undergo a psychological evaluation. This had a positive impact on Brett, and he took the opportunity to reconnect with his family, with whom he had not communicated while incarcerated. The parole board noticed the positive changes in Brett and granted him early release on November 24, 2010. However, his newfound freedom was bittersweet and even more challenging than before. Before his imprisonment, Brett was a painter carrying emotional burdens. After his release, he was a bank robber and ex-convict with a tarnished reputation. After the robbery incident, Brett struggled to find a job due to his notorious reputation. Even people who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they recognized him as the bearded robber. To make matters worse, their neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and frequently visited, began spreading unpleasant rumors about the family. As a result, the Ryan family decided to sell their house and move to Scarborough. In their new location, Susan started a new garden and Brett managed to find a job at a trading company, although his salary was not high. Fortunately, his parents were able to support him financially as he worked to rebuild his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist who consistently advised him to maintain a close relationship with his family. This advice proved to be valuable. Despite this, Brett's financial situation remained a challenge. However, his life took a positive turn in September 2011 when he met Kristen Baxter, a wonderful young woman who owned an apartment with a beautiful sea view. She maintained a healthy lifestyle through sports and didn't concern herself with Brett's past. The couple enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son happy and believed Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential and become a responsible member of society. Brett's life was improving, but an unexpected event occurred that threatened to derail his progress. His father's sudden passing was a devastating blow, and Brett's depression began to resurface. To cope, he increased his visits to a psychologist and devoted more time to supporting his mother financially, although his own funds were limited. As their long-term relationship evolved, Brett knew it was time to take a significant step. No longer just careless teenagers, the young couple needed to build a life together. Deeply in love with Kristen, Brett decided to make a heartfelt proposal. He had saved up some money and discussed his plans with his mother, wanting to make the proposal unforgettable and impossible for Kristen to refuse. Susan understood what her son Brett was hinting at, so she gave him money to buy an engagement ring for his girlfriend Kristen. Previously, the couple had discussed their future together, and Kristen didn't need an extravagant gift to prove Brett's commitment. However, Brett wanted to make a grand gesture and purchased a gold ring with a large diamond for her. Needless to say, Kristen accepted his proposal. Once engaged, the couple began making wedding plans. Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was shocked by how expensive everything was and how it made him worried about his job security. This motivated him to find a well-paying job to support their future together. He discovered an engineering job opening at a large tech company, created a resume, and applied for the position. After a successful interview, he got the job, which thrilled him. Brett excitedly shared the news with Kristen and his mother, and he even asked his mother for money to buy a fancy suit for his new job. Brett's mother had agreed to buy him a suit for a job interview. However, just after the purchase, the company called to inform him that his application was rejected due to his criminal past, which the security service had discovered. Brett was devastated by the news and felt like giving up. He questioned the point of continuing with the interview process if no one wanted to hire an ex-criminal, regardless of his attempts to reform. Disheartened, Brett decided to abandon his university studies and instead use the money his mother and brothers had given him to finance his wedding to Kristen. He didn't inform his family or counselor about his decision to drop out of university, nor did he share the news about being rejected for the engineering job. Brett created a false image of himself as a successful businessman. He'd dress up in a suit and tie, then change into painting clothes on his way to work. He lied to his relatives, telling them he worked in an office, and supported this fiction by posting photos on social media that he downloaded from the internet. When he was with his family, Brett would often pretend to receive important work calls, making excuses to take care of urgent business matters. He was skilled at deceiving those around him, and no one suspected that he was actually just a house painter. In September 2016, Brett's 5-year relationship with Kristen was nearing its climax as they planned their wedding. He even agreed to rent an expensive restaurant that would cost $100 per guest. The Ryan family was overjoyed, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around, with a prestigious job, a fancy apartment, and a beautiful fiancée. Brett's lies had spiraled out of control, and there was no escape from the consequences. With the wedding only a month away, he had invested heavily in the event. To foot the bill, he repeatedly borrowed money from his mother, and when she could no longer help, he shamelessly demanded that she get a better-paying job. Around the same time, he planned an extravagant bachelor party in August, inviting all his friends and brothers. As his web of lies began to unravel, Brett confided in his counselor about the situation. For a year, he had deceived his family into believing he worked as an engineer for a technology company. The psychologist was dismayed that his longtime client had gone astray again and advised Brett to confess everything to his mother. After much contemplation and procrastination, Brett finally came clean to her. His mother was outraged, having proudly told everyone about her supposed wonderful son. She insisted that Brett reveal the truth to Kristen, threatening to expose him herself if he didn't comply. Moreover, she warned him that his brothers were already aware of the situation and sided with her. Brett couldn't muster the courage to confess to Kristen, having struggled to tell the truth to his mother in the first place. Brett knew the wedding was only a month away, but he remained silent about his lies, even though it would be better for Kristen to know the truth beforehand. He was unsure what he was hoping to achieve by keeping quiet, but he couldn't shake the thought that his mother might expose him to Kristen, causing a scandal. Every time Kristen's phone rang, Brett's heart skipped a beat, fearing it was his mother calling to reveal his secrets. He breathed a sigh of relief when it was just a friend inquiring about the wedding plans. Desperate to stop his mother from interfering, Brett hatched a sinister plan. Because he was not allowed to use firearms due to his previous robbery conviction, he decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon. Brett had learned how to shoot a crossbow from his late father, who used to practice target shooting in their garden. Though his father had taught him well, he never intended for Brett to use this skill for harm. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows from a sporting goods store, and hid them away, preparing to carry out his disturbing plan. Brett created an alibi to deceive others into thinking he was at home all day. He rigged a fan to turn on at a set time, which then moved a spoon across his computer keyboard, automatically posting pre-written comments on YouTube videos. On August 25th, Brett dressed in disguise to conceal his identity and left his house through the back door to avoid detection by security cameras. He took a train to his parents' house, intent on taking care of anyone who might threaten his and Kristen's well-being. When Brett arrived unexpectedly at his parents' house, his mother Susan was taken aback. Despite her poor health that day, Brett persisted in trying to convince her not to tell Kristen anything, eventually becoming angry and aggressive. Susan sensed something was wrong and, intimidated by her son's intense behavior, warned him that she had already called Christopher and he was on his way to their location. Brett's anger and adrenaline surged out of control as he ran to the garage to grab a crossbow. However, his emotional state prevented him from making a clear shot, so he instead used the butt of the gun to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he placed plastic bags over her body and tightened a rope around her neck. Brett then loaded the crossbow with arrows and hid in the bushes, waiting for his brother Christopher to arrive. When Christopher called out for their mother or brother, Brett shot him in the neck from behind, causing his death within minutes. Susan, their mother, had also called their youngest brother Alexander, who was also shot in the neck, but the arrow didn't go deep enough, and he began screaming for help. Throughout the chaos, Leland was oblivious to the violence unfolding in the garage and garden, unaware that his own brother was committing the crimes. He slept in his second-floor room until a scream disturbed him. Rushing downstairs, Leland found Brett trying to strangle Alexander, and a fierce fight broke out between the two brothers. Once Leland gained the upper hand, he pushed Brett aside and ran to the neighbors to call the police. Brett realized he was trapped in the house with no escape, overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. He acknowledged that he had ruined his life and there was no turning back. He took out his phone and wrote a letter to Kristen, begging for her forgiveness. When the police arrived, they found Brett sitting next to his brother Alexander, both of them covered in blood. Despite his injuries, Alexander was still alive, but later succumbed to his wounds in the hospital. Brett voluntarily handed himself over to the police, asking to be handcuffed and taken to the station. There, he confessed to the crimes and revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden under packages in the garage. He expressed regret, stating that he had never intended to kill Susan, only to scare her. However, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, using them as witnesses to his twisted scheme. If they hadn't arrived that day, they would still be alive, just like they had been nearly 10 years prior. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his depression, but it didn't lessen his punishment. Despite confessing to the crimes without resistance and cooperating with the investigation, he received 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. He will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the tragedy, has declined to speak to the press, but he is well known in Toronto for his traumatic experience. The case of Fisako Sano. Fisako Sano, later known as Sachiko Yamada, was born on November 28, 1980, in Mitsuke, a small town in Niigata Prefecture, Japan. She came from an average-income family and was a beloved child. She attended a local school, enjoyed baseball, and supported the local team. On November 13, 1990, 2 weeks before her 10th birthday, Fisako, then in the 4th grade, was walking home from school after staying late to watch a baseball game. Her parents were aware of her schedule, so they weren't worried when she walked home alone on her usual route. The cold autumn evening was dark, with few pedestrians and cars passing by quickly. Suddenly, a car overtook her and screeched to a halt, swerving in front of her. This sudden event marked a turning point in Fusako's life. Nobuyuki Sat, the kidnapper, was born on July 15, 1962, in Niigata Prefecture, Japan, into a wealthy family. His family's successful business was related to passenger transportation. As the youngest child, Nobuyuki was spoiled and capricious, with no limits set for him. He was emotional and sometimes aggressive when his demands weren't met immediately. His father was 62, and his mother was 37 when he was born, and he had 5 older siblings from his father's previous marriage, but he didn't have a close relationship with them. Nobuyuki's behavior was often erratic and challenging. On one occasion, he even threw a tantrum in a store, physically lashing out at his mother when she refused to buy him another toy. At school, his peculiar behavior and difficulty interacting with others made it hard for him to make friends. His tall stature, which embarrassed him, led to teasing and unkind nicknames, causing him to slouch to try to minimize his height. Despite his father's efforts to provide him with a comfortable and spacious room in their luxurious European-style home, Nobuyuki was unhappy and afraid to be alone in the room. His restless behavior and irrational fears prompted his parents to seek professional help from a doctor. The boy was first examined at a regular hospital and then sent to see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist diagnosed him with several anxiety disorders, including a fear of the dark, a fear of germs and dirt, and a unique combination of 2 other phobias. On one hand, he had autophobia, which is a fear of being alone. On the other hand, he also had sociophobia, which is a fear of social interactions. This meant that he was equally afraid of being by himself and of being around other people. Nobuki was a loner throughout his life. Despite being attractive, he never had a girlfriend in high school, nor did he have any friends. His peers shunned him, and he became an outcast. As a result, he took out his frustrations on his elderly parents, who always forgave him and tried to make him happy with gifts and money. As an adult, Nobuki struggled to hold down a job. He frequently got into trouble, clashed with coworkers, and neglected his responsibilities, making him unemployable. He would often leave work early for frivolous reasons, such as feeling sad because it was raining. On one occasion, he intentionally hurt a female colleague, likely to get her attention. The incident was deemed an accident, but Nobuki was immediately fired. He never found another job and relied on his parents for financial support. Over time, Nobuki became increasingly reclusive, rarely leaving his room, and his conflicts with his parents escalated. After a particularly heated argument, Nobuki set a fire in his own home, which nearly destroyed the entire house and its occupants. After being sent to a psychiatric clinic for compulsory treatment, Sato was diagnosed with manic depressive disorder, uncontrollable outbursts of aggression, and signs of misogyny, which involves intense dislike and hatred towards women. He stayed in the hospital for over a month before being discharged, deemed no longer a threat to others. For a while, Nobuyuki seemed calm and even started rebuilding and expanding his partially burned house. However, his efforts were short-lived, and he eventually abandoned the construction. As time passed, Sato became increasingly withdrawn and isolated, spending most of his time alone in his room watching TV. He started to shut out his parents, refusing to let them enter not only his room, but also the entire second floor. If they violated this boundary, he would lash out at them violently, shouting and threatening them with death. In the spring of 1989, Nobuyuki began taking walks near a local school, where he would closely observe the female students. Initially, he kept his distance and didn't attempt to approach or contact anyone. However, one day, he suddenly grabbed a 9-year-old girl at the school gate, threw her over his shoulder, and ran to his nearby parked car. The incident occurred in front of other children, who immediately shouted for help. A school security guard and bystanders quickly responded, rescuing her and detaining Nobuyuki before the police arrived. Unable to explain his motives, Nobuyuki was charged with attempting to commit violent acts against a minor. He faced a potential prison sentence, but during his trial in August 1989, Nobuyuki received only a year's probation. According to some reports, his father's connections and payment of a large sum of money influenced the outcome. Furthermore, Nobuyuki's name was mysteriously removed from the database of prosecuted criminals soon after. Here, his father's efforts also played a role, but ultimately backfired. The elderly man worked tirelessly to clear his son's name, but in the process, he suffered a heart attack and died in the hospital. Sor was overcome with shame and regret for raising a monstrous individual. A year and a half after the initial failed attempt, the 28-year-old Sor kidnapped a girl in Nagata. Despite his calm demeanor, he remained under the radar of the police, and the incident near the school in the spring of 1989 was all but forgotten. On November 13, 1990, Nobuyuki Sato went for a drive around the city, eventually finding himself on a deserted road in the evening. There, he came across 9-year-old Fusako Sano, who was walking home from a delayed school event. The area was isolated, with no people or cars in sight, leaving Fusako with no one to turn to for help. Sato suddenly stopped his car in front of Fusako, got out, and grabbed her while holding a knife. He threatened to slit her throat if she screamed or tried to escape. He then forced her into the trunk of his car and drove further down the road. Eventually, he stopped in a vacant lot, where he tied Fusako's hands and feet and taped her mouth shut. Once night fell, Sato drove back to his house, taking Fusako out of the trunk and carrying her to his room through an unfinished part of the building to avoid detection. He then left his room, re-entering through the front door as he normally would. Back upstairs, he threatened Fusako with the knife, ordering her to be silent. He tied her to the bed, warning her that if she tried to leave the room, look out the window, scream or cry, he would kill her and dispose of her body in the ocean where it would never be found. She was terrified and obeyed the kidnapper's every command, still holding on to hope that he would show mercy and release her. Meanwhile, the search for the missing girl began when Fusako failed to return home from school. Her parents grew worried because they knew she had planned to stay late to watch a baseball game, but since it was already dark outside and she was long overdue, they knew something was amiss. Initially, Fusako's parents tried to locate her on their own, retracing her usual route from school to home, but their efforts yielded nothing. As night began to fall, they sought the police's help, hoping that swift action would lead to her prompt recovery. The police launched a search operation, which was soon bolstered by dozens of local volunteers who joined the effort by the next morning. The search for the missing girl continued the next day, with over 200 people involved. They thoroughly searched the area, posted flyers with her picture, and talked to people who might have seen something. Interestingly, Nobuyuki lived close to her school and the police station. Moreover, he had a history of attempting to kidnap her, yet he was not considered a suspect. Thanks to his father's efforts to keep his son's name out of the criminal database, the search lasted for months, covering many areas, including empty buildings, vehicles, and highways. Despite the extensive search, no leads or clues about her disappearance were found. Investigators explored various possibilities, including the unlikely suggestion that North Korean agents might have been involved in the abduction. As time passed, the search for Fusako Sano was unsuccessful, and she remained a captive of Nobuyuki's obsession. Initially, Fusako was terrified and obediently followed her captor's orders, hoping that he would eventually show mercy and release her. However, Nobuyuki had no intention of letting her go, at least not for the first few months. To maintain control, Nobuyuki bound Fusako's hands and feet extremely tightly, restricting blood flow and causing her to lose feeling in her limbs. He punished even the slightest disobedience or noise with a stun gun, beat her on the head and body, or threatened her with a knife. Despite his cruel treatment, Nobuyuki never sexually exploited Fusako during her captivity. Instead, he viewed her as a living toy or pet, someone to talk to and dominate. Nobuyuki would sit with Fusako, feeding her 1 or 2 meals a day, prepared by his mother who lived on the first floor. Due to her severely restricted diet, she became extremely weak and malnourished. The man prohibited her from leaving her bed, forcing her to use plastic bags as a toilet, which he would then dispose of in the unfinished part of the house. Once a month, he bathed her in a basin, cutting her hair and nails himself, and dressing her in his own tattered clothes. Despite her obedient behavior, the kidnapper regularly beat her for entertainment, practicing various fighting techniques on her. After several years, Fusako's spirit was finally crushed, and she surrendered to her tormentor's demands, no longer attempting to escape or even glance out the window. Eventually, the man stopped restraining her when he left the room, leaving the door unlocked. He would simply cover her with blankets or towels, making it seem as though no one was underneath. Over time, Nobuyuki began to permit Fusako to listen to the radio and watch TV with him, but only if it was something that interested him, such as Scottish programs or sports matches. He also brought her comic books, which he loved. These were the only things Fusako had read during her years of confinement. For nearly a decade, a young girl was held captive in a small room, never speaking to anyone or leaving her confinement. She was mostly bedridden and had lost all will to resist, escape, or signal for help. Her captive was Nobuyuki, a violent son who lived with his mother on the first floor of the house. His mother was too afraid to enter his room, fearing physical harm if she disobeyed his rules. When Nobuyuki took she prisoner, he forbade his mother from visiting the second floor. On one occasion, even physically pushed her down the stairs when she tried to do so. In 1996, an elderly woman, Mrs. Sato, sought help from the police, alleging domestic violence by her son, who had physically abused her, forced her to follow his rules, and psychologically tormented her. However, the police were reluctant to intervene, convincing her to withdraw her statement and resolve the issue on her own. On two separate occasions, Mrs. Sato also sought help from a public health center, complaining about her son's aggressive behavior and requesting his hospitalization in a psychiatric facility. Unfortunately, her pleas were dismissed, and she was advised to persuade her son to seek help voluntarily. 4 years later, in January 2000, after enduring yet another brutal beating, Mrs. Sato made a desperate call to the hospital, requesting a medical team and law enforcement to be sent to her home. She was being held captive by her son, who had tied her up and used a taser on her multiple times. The authorities finally responded to a pensioner's complaints and visited her home. When they arrived with an ambulance and police car, her son Nobuyuki became agitated, aggressive, and resistant. Due to his behavior, the police had to restrain him with handcuffs, and medics administered a large dose of sedatives. The elderly woman confessed that she lived in fear of her son, whose behavior had become increasingly aggressive and unpredictable. She revealed that she had avoided the second floor of their home for years because her son had threatened to kill her if she went up there. The police decided to investigate the second floor and Nobuyuki's room. Upon entering, they found a pile of blankets on the bed that seemed to move slightly. When they pulled back the blankets, they were shocked to discover a thin, pale, and exhausted girl hidden underneath. When questioned, she quietly identified herself and explained that she had been kidnapped on her way home from school a long time ago. After the shocking discovery, Nayuki's mother was questioned in the room about the captive girl, but she appeared genuinely surprised and denied any knowledge of her presence in their home, claiming she only knew about her son and herself living there. The captive corroborated this, stating she had never seen Nayuki's mother before. Nuki confessed to the police that he had been immediately attracted to Fusako when he saw her walking along the road, and he wanted to take her home with him. He claimed to have taken good care of her, providing for her needs, washing and dressing her, and reading her comic books. Although he admitted to punishing her when she disobeyed, he insisted that he treated her with affection, like a friend. Nuki believed that Fusako had feelings for him and was happy to stay with him. Nuki enjoyed talking to Fusako, discussing topics like soccer, music, and comic books. Even though she didn't respond, he noted that he never locked his bedroom door, and yet Fusako never tried to escape, leading him to believe that she was content living with him. The medical examination revealed that Nuki was capable of understanding his actions despite his mental disorder, and he could face trial. His mother could be considered an accomplice because she regularly bought feminine hygiene products for her son, which might have raised suspicions. However, the fact that she consistently reached out to the police and medical institutions for help was taken into account. The case drew widespread attention before the trial began, and the local police faced severe criticism. They had previously prosecuted Nuki for attempting to kidnap a schoolgirl, but they failed to prevent him from carrying out his plan. As a result, the local police chief and the head of the regional police department were removed from their positions. In May 2000, Nuki was put on trial, where prosecutors examined every aspect of his actions to seek the maximum punishment. As a result, Nuki was found guilty and received a 14-year prison sentence. Nuki was released in the spring of 2015, but his mother had passed away by then, leaving him with no living relatives. Unfortunately, he was found dead in a small rented room in early 2017, and the cause of his death remains unknown. Fusako's life was devastated by the ordeal. When she was finally discovered, she was extremely weak, malnourished, and had severe muscle atrophy. She had developed a stutter, was afraid of sunlight, and had almost lost her ability to communicate. Her parents didn't even recognize their own daughter when they saw her for the first time in nearly a decade. After the ordeal, Fusako took around a year to regain her physical strength, but her mental recovery was much slower. She suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, became reclusive, and her cognitive development was stunted at a level comparable to a 9 to 10-year-old child. To escape the media frenzy, her parents moved her to a new town, where she adopted the alias Sachiko Yamada and refused all press interviews. Over time, Sachiko gradually built relationships, developed a passion for photography, and even managed to pass her driver's license exam. Tragically, in 2007, she experienced another devastating blow when her father accidentally drowned in front of her during a family outing to a pond. The case of Patrick de la Cerda. Patrick de la Cerda was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, to a loving family. His father, Max de la Cerda, was from Spain, and his mother, Patricia Ronza, was from France, and moved to the US in the 1980s, where she married Max and had Patrick. Patrick grew up in a supportive and caring environment, surrounded by his parents' kindness, mutual respect, and care. He was a bright, sociable, and friendly person who excelled in school and made friends easily. His parents prioritized his education and upbringing, providing him with every opportunity to become a worthy individual. Patrick's father was a skilled construction specialist who had worked in the field all his life. Although the family wasn't wealthy, they were considered well off by city standards. After high school, Patrick decided to follow in his father's footsteps by enrolling in the construction faculty. However, during his university years, his parents divorced after nearly 25 years of marriage. The divorce was amicable, with no conflicts or disputes over property. Patrick's mother moved to Deltona, where she remarried, while Patrick chose to stay with his father in Miami, where they worked together as respected professionals in the construction industry. Despite their divorce, the family remained extremely close-knit and supportive. They regularly kept in touch through phone calls and were always willing to help each other when needed. Patrick frequently visited his mother in Deltona, sharing his life updates, happiness, and experiences, and introducing her to his love interests. With his mixed French-Spanish heritage, Patrick had a charming appearance from a young age, making him popular among they. However, having grown up in a family that valued strong relationships, he never pursued casual flings, instead seeking true mutual love and a strong, loving family of his own. Patrick met Jessica on a popular dating site in June 2017. Although he wasn't sure he'd find someone special, he was drawn to her striking appearance and charming smile. Jessica, born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida, responded to his message, and they started communicating easily. She had studied banking at a local university and worked at a bank branch in Orlando. As they shared their thoughts and experiences, they quickly developed mutual sympathy and trust. After exchanging phone numbers, they talked for hours every evening for the next couple of weeks, building a strong connection. The young people, Patrick and Jessica, decided to meet in person after connecting online. Because they lived in different parts of the state, they chose a midpoint for their meeting. On their first date, Patrick was immediately smitten with Jessica and knew he wanted to be with her. Jessica also felt a strong connection, although she was slightly taken aback by their 4-year age difference. Thrilled, Patrick called his mom, Patricia, on the way home to tell her about the girl he wanted to marry and start a family with. Patricia could hear the excitement in her son's voice and knew he was serious, making her happy for him. As their long-distance relationship continued for several months, the couple faced the challenge of living far apart, only able to see each other on weekends in neutral locations. To spend quality time together, they would often rent a cozy hotel room in a secluded spot. They cherished these moments, but by Sunday evening, they would reluctantly part ways, returning to their respective homes to prepare for work on Monday morning. In December 2017, Patrick moved to Delton to be closer to his girlfriend Jessica, who lived nearby. He purchased a house in a quiet neighborhood and started renovating it to create a cozy home for when Jessica would join him. However, Jessica was unable to leave her job immediately, so they planned to have a housewarming party in early spring the following year. As the new year approached, Patrick decided to propose to Jessica. He set up a romantic surprise, arranging fireworks in the backyard of his new house. While Jessica was distracted by the display, Patrick got down on one knee and presented her with a ring, asking her to be his wife. Overjoyed, Jessica accepted his proposal. Patrick revealed that he had been searching for the perfect engagement ring for a long time, but couldn't find one that met his high standards. He settled for a decent ring from a jewelry store to propose before the new year, but he had already commissioned a custom-made ring from a jewelry workshop, designed specifically to his taste. Patrick's life was about to take a dramatic turn. It had been 2 months since he got engaged, and wedding and housewarming preparations were in full swing. Both sets of parents had given their blessing, and the happy couple was ecstatic about their future together. They were planning a grand celebration in either Miami or France, the groom's mother's hometown. But on February 27, 2018, concern set in when Max, Patrick's father, received a call from a courier. The delivery company had listed Max's number as an alternate contact. The courier reported that Patrick's order had been delivered to his address, but he wasn't answering the door or his phone. This wasn't like Patrick, and Max immediately felt worried. Since he was at work and couldn't check on his son, he decided to ask his future daughter-in-law for help. Patrick's father called Jessica, his voice laced with anxiety, saying he couldn't reach his son. Jessica had been trying to contact Patrick all morning, but he hadn't replied to her messages or calls. When she told Patrick's father, Max, he feared something must have happened to him. Jessica rushed to Patrick's house as quickly as possible. When she arrived, she saw his car in the driveway, suggesting he hadn't left. Using her own key, she entered the yard and loudly called out to Patrick, but there was no response. Jessica cautiously opened the front door and was met with a horrific scene. Her fiancé lay at the entrance, surrounded by a pool of his own blood, showing no signs of life. She immediately called emergency services, but the paramedics who arrived were unable to help Patrick and sadly declared him dead. By the time the police arrived, Jessica was devastated, sobbing in the backyard of the house where Patrick had proposed to her just 2 months prior. When an officer approached her, she pointed an accusatory finger at a single individual, a wealthy and influential ex-boyfriend. According to Jessica, he was responsible for murdering her lover and destroying her life. To make sense of this complex case, it's essential to go back in time to when Jessica and Patrick first met. At that point, Jessica was in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a successful businessman who owned an investment fund. He was 20 years older than her and had swept her off her feet during her student years. Gregory lavished her with expensive gifts and exotic getaways, and Jessica believed she had found her soulmate. However, she soon began to notice peculiarities in his behavior that raised red flags. Gregory exerted control over his girlfriend Jessica, monitoring her every move and conversation. If she had a male admirer, he would threaten and intimidate them away. Meanwhile, he was secretive about his own life, sharing little information with her. Their 8-year relationship was marked by Gregory's refusal to introduce Jessica to his family and friends. He dictated when they would spend time together, go on vacation, or visit his home, claiming to be too busy. Jessica longed for a normal family life, including having children, but Gregory always put it off, saying the time was not right. When Jessica attempted to end the relationship, Gregory proposed to her, and she accepted. However, nothing changed. They still lived apart and only saw each other when Gregory permitted. After Gregory was in a car accident and hospitalized, Jessica rushed to his side, but first she stopped by his house to gather some belongings for him. Jessica encountered a mysterious woman at the house who refused to introduce herself and instead asked Jessica who she was. Jessica explained that she was the bride of the house's owner, showing her engagement ring as proof. The stranger then revealed her own ring and introduced herself as Diora Sanchez, Bender's legal wife. Stunned, Jessica decided to end her relationship with the cheating businessman. However, Gregory begged her to stay, promising to divorce Diora soon and marry Jessica instead. Naively, Jessica believed him, but time passed and nothing changed. Frustrated, she joined a dating site and met Patrick, with whom she started communicating. Finally, Jessica mustered the courage to break up with Gregory, but he refused to let her go. Bender initially tried to win Jessica back by promising to divorce his wife, but when that failed, he resorted to threats and harassment. When that didn't work, he became suspicious and decided to find out who Jessica was communicating with. He hired professionals to hack into her account and gather information. After discovering that Jessica was talking to Patrick, Gregory sent him threatening messages, claiming Jessica was his fiancée and demanding that he break up with her. While Patrick remained calm, believing the threats were empty, Jessica was terrified. She knew Bender had the means to carry out his threats, given his wealth, connections, and large collection of firearms. Jessica suggested ending their relationship to avoid hurting anyone, but Patrick refused to consider it. Instead, they went to the police and presented evidence of Gregory Bender's stalking and threats. As a result, they obtained a restraining order prohibiting Gregory from approaching or contacting them in any way. Additionally, the court ordered him to surrender all firearms in his possession. For a period of time, things seemed to return to normal, and the couple, Jessica and Patrick, thought they had finally escaped the stalker's attention. However, Jessica remained uneasy and persuaded Patrick to install security cameras both outside and inside their home, fearing that Gregory might ignore the restraining order. Let's go back to the tragic events of February 27, 2018. During the initial crime scene investigation, detectives quickly dismissed the possibility of a robbery and instead suspected a personal motive, given the brutality of the murder. The killer seemingly had a deep hatred for the victim. The 25-year-old victim's body had 4 gunshot wounds, including shots to the thigh, chest, and head. The examination also revealed injuries consistent with a fall from a ladder. The body was found lying on the floor between the front door and the stairs leading to the second floor. The killer likely sneaked into the house and waited for Patrick on the second floor. When Patrick climbed the stairs, the intruder ambushed him, shooting him in the thigh. Patrick fell down the stairs, and the killer followed, shooting him again in the chest, and then delivering 2 fatal headshots. The murder weapon, a rare and hard-to-get pistol, was never found. However, investigators discovered 3 shell casings, 1 on the 2nd floor and 2 more downstairs. The 4th shell casing was missing, suggesting the killer took it as a souvenir. Jessica claimed to know the killer's identity, but the police initially suspected Patrick's neighbor, a U.S. Army veteran who had a history of conflict with the victim. The neighbor had been wounded and concussed in combat, which led to a mental disorder. The veteran was skilled with firearms and had access to rare guns. In December 2017, he mistakenly shot at his new neighbor, thinking he was a burglar. Fortunately, no one was physically harmed, but the neighbor was hospitalized for a psychiatric condition that worsened due to the incident. After his return, the neighbor stalked Patrick, accusing him of being a spy and threatening to expose him. Given the neighbor's mental illness and potential motive, he was detained and questioned. Although he openly disliked Patrick, he had a solid alibi confirmed by multiple people at the time of the murder. The investigation focused on finding evidence and provoking a reaction from the perpetrator. The initial theory of a robbery was quickly dismissed since nothing was stolen or disturbed in the house, except for the hard drives containing video surveillance footage. This made it impossible to identify who entered or left the house that day. Forensic experts found no evidence, including fingerprints, shoe prints, or DNA traces, at the crime scene. The murder was meticulously planned, and although the investigators were convinced of Gregory's guilt, he seemed likely to get away with it. To catch him, the police devised a covert plan, asking Jessica to lure her former lover into a frank conversation. Jessica agreed and called Gregory, yelling at him, crying, and demanding to know why he had committed the crime. However, Gregory was suspicious from the start and feigned innocence, pretending to be shocked when Jessica accused him of murdering her fiancé. He even expressed condolences to her, never cracking under pressure. The police were unable to provoke him into a confession or a false move, and without sufficient evidence, they could only ask him to testify, but not detain or question him. Gregory had honored the restraining order and seemed to have moved on from his past with Jessica. Daura Sanchez Bender contacted the police with crucial information about the Patrick de la Cerda case. She had seen a suspicious notebook in her husband's office with a detailed plan of an unknown person's house and a strange algorithm of actions. Although she didn't think much of it at the time, she connected it to the crime after seeing a news report. The police searched her husband's office and found the notebook, but the relevant pages were missing. However, they were discovered in the trash can, where Gregory had carelessly discarded them. The pages contained a detailed plan of the crime, including instructions to avoid leaving traces. The records showed that Gregory had been stalking Patrick, knew his daily routine, and was aware of the surveillance cameras. Gregory tried to cover his tracks by disposing of evidence, but he made critical mistakes, including failing to destroy his records and underestimating his wife's curiosity. A 4th missing shell casing was found in a cigar box, confirmed to be from the crime scene. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the prosecution had enough circumstantial evidence to warrant Gregory's arrest. At the trial, Jessica testified about her tumultuous relationship with Gregory, including harassment and threats. However, the defense strategy focused on deflecting blame onto Jessica, accusing her of provoking Gregory's actions and being motivated by material gain. The defense downplayed the evidence of a murder plan, suggesting it was just a fantasy, and argued that the search of Gregory's home was illegal and the shell casing could have been planted. They also questioned the identification of the gun model by Jessica. During a court session, the defendant Gregory Bender's ex-wife, Daura Sanchez, testified as a witness. Until then, Gregory had shown little emotion, but he suddenly became animated and unexpectedly declared his love for Daura. This surprising confession seemed to influence Daura's testimony, and she began to question her initial statements. Despite her earlier claims, Daura said she was forgetful and eventually claimed that Having lived with Gregory for many years, she couldn't believe he was capable of murder. However, despite the lack of direct evidence and the defense team's efforts to challenge the search of Gregory's home, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced Gregory to life imprisonment without parole. As the sentence was read, Gregory fixed an intense stare on Jessica, his eyes unblinking, and seemed to glare at her. This made Jessica feel ill and brought her close to a panic attack. Jessica Devani sat beside her late fiancé's mother, overwhelmed with emotion, sobbing and choking back tears. Despite numerous appeals by Gregory and his legal team, all attempts to overturn the verdict were rejected. The public was fascinated by the case due to its shocking nature. A wealthy businessman brutally murdered a working-class man and tried to escape justice. Patrick de la Cerda's story has been widely reported, with Gregory currently in prison. Jessica finds comfort in keeping Patrick's memory alive and feels safe. She wears the ring he gave her and a special piece of jewelry he had intended to give her. She remains close to Patrick's parents, who have welcomed her into their family as if she were their own daughter. The case of Sumner family. James and Carol Alford, also known as Reggie and Sunar, grew up together in Charleston, South Carolina. They were the same age, attended the same school, and were in the same grade. As they grew older, their childhood friendship blossomed into romance. By the time they were 15, they had started dating and were inseparable. Their friends thought they made a beautiful couple, and James and Carol kept photos of their happy early years in their archives. They dreamed of a long, happy life together and planned to get married as soon as they turned 18. Their parents approved of their relationship and supported their decision. However, their plans were put on hold when James was called up for military service in the Army. They decided to postpone their wedding until his return and exchanged regular letters. But as time passed, James was sent to Vietnam, and contact with him was lost. Carol didn't know if he was alive, as he stopped writing to her. Carol continued her studies and got a job at the Charleston Air Force Base. She married twice, first in the late 1960s, but that marriage ended quickly and she had no children. In 1975, she married Richard Alford, with whom she had a daughter, Rhonda, in 1977. But her second marriage was also troubled, as her husband abused her and their daughter. In the mid-1980s, Carol could no longer tolerate the abuse and filed for divorce, taking her daughter with her. But Richard continued to harass her, trying to ruin her life. In 1987, he attacked her, shooting her several times in front of their 10-year-old daughter. Carol was lucky to survive, thanks to her neighbors who called for help. She underwent multiple surgeries, blood transfusions, and eventually recovered, although she lost sight in one eye and was left disabled. Her health began to deteriorate again in the late 1990s, and after a series of tests, she was diagnosed with liver cancer. In 1987, Carol's life was in danger due to medical complications, and she unknowingly contracted the hepatitis C virus. Over time, the virus damaged her liver, leading to cancer. Fortunately, with proper treatment and therapy, her condition stabilized. However, she had to take daily medications and undergo regular checkups for the rest of her life. The hepatitis C diagnosis, combined with previous severe gunshot wounds, made it impossible for her to work physically demanding jobs. She eventually found work as a call center operator. Meanwhile, James, her high school sweetheart, had a traumatic experience in Vietnam. He was severely wounded and mistakenly reported dead. He survived and returned home, but lost contact with Carol. Years later, James married, but the marriage ended and he was left alone, struggling with chronic health issues. In 2000, Carol received a call at work from a familiar voice, James. She was hesitant to believe it was really him, as she thought he had died in the war. The two cried and reminisced, eventually agreeing to meet in person. After 38 years apart, they reunited and rekindled their romance. Carol and James started seeing each other daily and soon decided to move in together. They got married 5 months later and lived in the Riverland Terrace neighborhood of Charleston, South Carolina. Despite their health issues, they were happy and took care of each other. They lived near the Cole family, who had their own set of troubles, including Stephen, a Vietnam veteran confined to a wheelchair, and his wife Natalie, who often spent time with friends in bars. Tiffany, the daughter of James's ex, was often left to fend for herself from a young age. She would hang out on the streets with no money, not even for small treats. When James and Carol started living together, Tiffany was still in high school. Carol, being kind-hearted, sympathized with the girl who was unwanted by her own mother. For 5 years, Carol looked out for Tiffany like a daughter, inviting her to family meals, buying her clothes, and giving her money for expenses. In 2004, when the Summers decided to sell their Chevrolet Lumino minivan, Tiffany asked to buy it in installments since she had no money and desperately needed a car. The Summers agreed to sell it to her for a very low price, divided into 12 payments over a year. In early 2005, the Summers were forced to move to Florida due to their deteriorating health. Doctors recommended a warmer climate, so they sold their Charleston home and bought a new one in Jacksonville, along with a Lincoln Town car. They were happy in their new home, making plans for their future. Every day, Carol would call her adult daughter Rhonda, sharing her thoughts and plans. But one day in June 2005, Carol didn't call, and Rhonda couldn't reach her. Rhonda was worried but hoped everything was okay. The next day, there was still no answer. Rhonda called her mother's and James's cell phones every half hour, but they were unavailable and the answering machine remained unanswered. On the third day, Rhonda drove to Florida to check on her mother and stepfather. When she arrived, she noticed the car was missing, the front door was open, and the house was in disarray. There was a table set for dinner, but the food was 3 days old. It looked like the owners had abruptly left in the middle of a meal. Rhonda saw medications, including her mother's cancer pills and James's insulin, on the bedside table. The cell phones were dead. Rhonda realized her mother and stepfather couldn't have left without their medications and phones, so she contacted the police to report the incident. The police put out a wanted list for the Summers car, blocked their bank cards, and began searching for them. The first few days yielded no results, but on June 12th, a man called a bank, claiming to be James Schur, complaining that his card was blocked. This led the police to investigate further. The bank employee became suspicious when checking the card information and offered Mr. Schur to visit the nearest branch to resolve the issue, but he hung up. Shortly after, a woman called from the same number, claiming to be Mrs. Carol Schur, and reported a similar problem with her blocked card. When asked to visit the bank in person, she refused, citing health issues, and asked to regain access to her savings, which was denied. The bank immediately handed over the call recordings and information to the police. When played to Rhonda, the couple's daughter, she confirmed that the voices did not belong to her parents, who were in their 60s, while the callers sounded much younger. The police suspected that the imposters were involved in the couple's disappearance, either holding them captive or killing them after obtaining bank account information. A few days later, the couple's abandoned car was found on a deserted road with no signs of struggle or blood inside. However, hair and sweat marks from both spouses were found in the trunk, suggesting they were taken away in their own car. Further investigation revealed that money had been withdrawn from their accounts after their disappearance, and ATM footage showed a young man making the withdrawals. The police traced the calls made from the imposter's number and found that the SIM card was purchased shortly before the couple's disappearance. A call was made to a car rental company where a Mazda RX-8 was rented under the name Tiffany Cole. The same car was used to withdraw money from the couple's accounts. Using the car's built-in tracking device, the police located the Mazda RX-8 at a hotel in Charleston. A team was sent to apprehend the suspects, who were found celebrating in their hotel room, surrounded by packages and receipts from lavish purchases. The three suspects, Tiffany Cole, Michael J. Jackson, and Alan Lindell Wade, were taken into custody and questioned separately. Initially, they feigned ignorance or remained silent, but after several hours of interrogation and presentation of evidence, Tiffany confessed to robbing the elderly couple and using their stolen money to fund their lifestyle. Tiffany and her new boyfriend stayed overnight at the Summers house, where they were treated to dinner and hospitality. During the meal, Carol Summers mentioned that they had almost $100,000 in savings, which sparked an idea in Tiffany's mind. That night, Tiffany and her boyfriend began making plans to get their hands on the money. They enlisted the help of two accomplices, Bruce and Alan, and started putting their plan into action. On June 6th, Tiffany rented a car while Bruce and Alan stole 4 shovels. Together, they drove to a deserted spot in the woods and began digging a grave for the Summers. On July 8th, Tiffany bought rope and duct tape, which she gave to Bruce and Alan. That evening, they approached the Summers house, pretending to need help and asking to use their phone. Carol, feeling sorry for them, let them in. Once inside, Bruce and Alan attacked the Summers, binding their hands and feet with duct tape and blindfolding them. They questioned the couple about their money and valuables, threatening them with torture and death. The Summers gave in, hoping to spare their lives. As soon as the attackers got the information they needed, 2 more accomplices arrived, helping to drag the Summers out to their car. They drove the car to the woods, with Tiffany and her boyfriend following behind in a second car. In the trunk, James managed to free his arm and remove the duct tape from his and his wife's faces. But it was too late. The car stopped, and the Summers were led to the grave, where they were pushed to their deaths. The elderly couple pleaded for their lives, but the young criminals showed no mercy, brutally killing them by burying them alive. According to Bruce, the perpetrators covered the bound couple with earth for about an hour, during which time the victims cried, confessed their love for each other, and said goodbye. The autopsy later revealed that the couple died of suffocation, with pieces of soil found in their mouths, respiratory tracts, and stomachs. After committing the heinous crime, the criminals abandoned the Lincoln in the woods and returned to town in a rented car. They broke into the Summers house, stealing valuable items, and then returned to South Carolina to spend their loot. However, their celebration was short-lived, as the stolen cards were blocked after 2 days, and all 4 perpetrators were arrested 4 days later. The trial and conviction followed. Bruce Nixon, who had fully admitted his guilt and cooperated with the investigation, was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Tiffany Cole, who claimed she was not directly involved in the murder, was given the death penalty, along with Jackson and Lindell, who had chosen to remain silent. The evidence against them, including Tiffany's involvement in the criminal plan, renting a car, and participating in the grave digging, was overwhelming. The 4 criminals appealed their sentences multiple times, but they were all denied. Although Jackson, Tiffany, and Lindell were sentenced to death, the penalty was never carried out, even 18 years after their atrocious crime. The case of Cat West. The case of Cat West, Cat Dawn West. Martin was born on February 15, 1975, in Davie, Florida. She grew up as an only child in a humble and modest family environment with parents Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Kat longed for a sibling, but her mother's health issues prevented that from happening. Instead, she became extremely attached to dolls, treating them like they were alive, singing to them, and carrying them around in school. Kat was known for her beauty and outgoing personality, actively participating in sports and dance. However, during her teenage years, she began to show signs of bipolar disorder, which included depression and anxiety, followed by periods of extreme happiness and restlessness. Unfortunately, her parents didn't realize what was happening until later. By that time, Kat had started using alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she received treatment for alcoholism that the underlying cause of her problems was discovered. In her 20s, Kat overcame her addiction to alcohol, but managing her bipolar disorder was more difficult. She had to take several strong medications that interacted with each other and caused side effects. Eventually, her disorder was brought under control, but she had to continue taking medication for the rest of her life. Sadly, her life was cut short. Kat dreamed of a traditional life with a husband, children, and a family, but her personal struggles with a psychological disorder and alcohol issues made it challenging. Despite these difficulties, she was a popular and lively person who loved being the center of attention. Kat had aspirations to become a model and would attend castings, trying out different looks. Her idol was Marilyn Monroe, whom she admired greatly. She watched Monroe's movies repeatedly, collected posters, and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Kat bore a resemblance to Monroe, which she happily exploited and treasured. Although Kat never became a famous model, her photos regularly appeared in local magazines, earning her some recognition and a small following. People would occasionally recognize her on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she finally met the man she would start a family with, William West. William Jeffrey West, who goes by his middle name Jeffrey, was born in 1970 in Alabama, where he grew up in an ordinary family. As a child, Jeffrey envisioned a future in the military or law enforcement. He was an excellent student, enthusiastic about sports, and physically fit. In the early 1990s, Jeffrey enlisted in the U.S. military, starting as a military police officer. His commitment led him to become a recruiter, responsible for recruiting new members into the Army and Navy. He eventually became the head of a recruitment division. Throughout his life, Jeffrey dedicated 20 years to serving in the military. William balanced his military career with higher education, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina, and later a master's degree in criminal justice and disaster and emergency management. He was intelligent, composed, and goal-oriented, yet modest and somewhat introverted, preferring quiet gatherings to loud parties and shunning the spotlight. After marrying young, he became a devoted family man and responsible parent to 2 children. After retiring from the military, William joined the police department of a university town as a corporal, tasked with ensuring campus safety. He took his duties seriously and responsibly, although he never had to use his issued service firearm throughout his career. Kat and Jeffrey, an unlikely couple, met in the mid-2000s. At the time, Jeffrey was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their differences, Jeffrey being a stern, quiet military man and Kat being a flamboyant, bold attention seeker, they felt an instant attraction. Their differences, including their 5-year age gap, Jeffrey's existing marriage, and Kat's struggles with alcoholism, did not deter their relationship. Jeffrey filed for divorce shortly after meeting Kat, and in a whirlwind romance, they got married in a Las Vegas chapel just 5 months later in 2005. They had a daughter, Lola, and settled in Sarah, Alabama, Jeffrey's hometown, in a cozy custom-built home designed by Kat herself. The bedroom was a shrine to her idol, Marilyn Monroe, with numerous portraits adorning the walls. Despite their vastly different personalities, the Wests were known to their neighbors as a happy couple. Kat, who preferred to be called Caitlin, was a fashionista who reveled in attention. She took great care in her appearance, always donning bold makeup, stylish hair, and fashionable outfits that drew admiration. She beamed with joy, perpetually smiling, and thrived on compliments. In stark contrast, Jeffrey appeared reserved, serious, and disciplined, traits likely shaped by his lengthy military career, and often seemed overshadowed by Kat's vibrant personality. Kat struggled to succeed as a model after getting married and having a daughter. Instead, she focused on being a homemaker, but she felt unfulfilled and craved attention. With the rise of social media, Kat started posting photos online, initially harmless pictures inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe. Over time, her posts became more provocative. Sources close to the couple say that Kat's husband didn't object to her new hobby and even helped her by taking photos. This turned into a profitable venture for Kat through paid subscriptions. The couple was seen buying seafood dishes, fine wine, and candles to set a romantic mood, captured on surveillance cameras. They appeared happy and carefree, joking and smiling, with no sign of the tragedy to come. After dinner, Kat, who had previously struggled with alcohol dependence, became her online persona, Kitty Cat, under the influence of the drinks. She asked her husband Jeff to take sultry photos, first in lingerie and then nude. Jeff agreed and took several revealing shots which were posted on Kat's private profile for fans only. By around 1 p.m., what was supposed to be a romantic evening escalated into a tragic nightmare. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Wests headed to work. Although the sun hadn't risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the West's house. At first, she wasn't sure what she was seeing, but as she slowed down, she realized with horror that an almost fully naked woman was lying motionless on the road. A woman witnessed someone standing on the doorstep of a house, but they vanished when they saw her. She couldn't determine if they entered the house or fled down the street. She was startled and uncertain, so she didn't approach the body right away. Instead, she went home, informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report their discovery. At the operator's request, the family returned to the scene and examined the body. They identified it as Mrs. West, but unfortunately there was no pulse. Her body was cold, and rigor mortis had set in. Mrs. West's body lay face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a pink bra top. A blood-stained pool had formed beneath her head, and a bottle of absinthe with bloodstains was nearby. Her damaged smartphone lay a short distance away. Since the area was quiet and residential, there were no other witnesses that night. This left a mystery about what happened between 8:30 p.m., when the West's car was last seen, and 5 a.m., when the body was discovered. The only person who might know what happened is Mr. West, but is he hiding something? Detective Michael Melhoff was one of the first to arrive at the scene of the crime. He went to the house where her body was found and spoke to the man who answered the door. The man appeared anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When the detective asked him where his wife was, the man said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then asked the man to step outside, where he told him that her body had been found nearby, identified by neighbors as Kat West. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective, confirming that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't rush to the body or show any signs of distress. When questioned about his actions the previous night, the man said he had slept soundly after a night of drinking. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also mentioned that his wife had bipolar disorder and struggled with alcoholism, which sometimes led to erratic behavior. He said that she would occasionally use their backyard trampoline, sometimes injuring herself when she missed it. A search of the house found no signs of a struggle or violence, but it did reveal evidence of a night of drinking, with 2 plates of leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle on the kitchen table. The police found Jeffrey's wife's high heels under the table and her matching underwear on the floor, but some suspicious items caught their attention: blood-stained napkins in the trash and an open bottle of cleaner. Jeffrey was arrested as the main suspect that day. He told investigators that he and his wife Kat had a tumultuous evening. After a photo shoot, Jeffrey wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He left to take a shower and returned to find Kat still sitting at the table, drinking straight from the bottle and texting on her phone. This infuriated Jeffrey, and he asked her to put the phone away, but she refused. When he tried to take it from her, they had a small struggle, during which he accidentally elbowed her face, causing a few drops of blood to appear from her nose. Jeffrey claimed that this was the blood the police found on the napkins. He said he eventually took the phone from Kat and threw it out the door into the darkness. Then, he went to bed, thinking Kat would soon calm down and join him. He allegedly had no idea what happened next until the police knocked on his door, asking about Kat. Mr. West proposed several theories to explain his wife's disappearance and death. One possibility was that she went outside to find her phone, taking the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. In this scenario, she might have fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and frozen to death. Alternatively, someone might have attacked her. Mr. West also found it puzzling that his wife was not wearing the bottom part of her pink lingerie set, and that she had gone outside in just a bra, without putting on any outerwear that was readily available near the entrance. He attributed these unusual actions to her being intoxicated from alcohol. The suspect's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and suspicious omissions. He claimed to be too drunk to recall certain details, leaving investigators to reconstruct the sequence of events. Although there were no witnesses, the evidence suggested that the 42-year-old woman died from a blow to the head, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, which was compounded by hypothermia. The autopsy revealed that the victim's blood alcohol level was extremely high, indicating severe intoxication that would have impaired her coordination and increased her risk of losing consciousness. At first, the evidence seemed to support a simple explanation. The heavily intoxicated victim had gone outside to look for her phone, taking the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. She likely lost her balance, fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and died from her injuries and exposure. However, the investigation found this scenario too convenient and suspiciously staged. Although the bottle with blood traces was found next to the victim's head and her smartphone was nearby, forensic analysis cast doubt on the idea that she had fallen and hit her head by herself. If that were the case, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, not remained alongside it. Kat's and her husband Jeff's fingerprints were found on a bottle, along with some unidentifiable smudged prints. The presence of blood-stained napkins and an opened bottle of household cleaner in the house led investigators to conclude that the couple had a violent argument. According to the theory presented in court, Kat's obsession with her online subscribers sparked the fight. In a fit of rage, Jeff allegedly struck Kat with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to make it look like an accidental fall by cleaning up the blood, but he failed to dispose of the evidence. The fitness app on Jeff's phone supported this theory, as it showed he was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived, contradicting his claim of being asleep. The police believed Jeff was trying to conceal evidence during these periods. A neighbor who discovered Kat's body remembered seeing a male figure on the doorstep who quickly left in an unknown direction in the early morning darkness. However, she couldn't confirm whether it was Jeff or someone else, nor could she say whether the person entered the house or not. The investigators were intrigued by the online presence of the deceased, who had many male admirers paying to see her revealing photos as Kitty Cat. This led them to consider the possibility of an obsessed follower among her subscribers, someone who might have tried to track her down for a personal encounter. The victim, a middle-aged homemaker, regularly received messages from men, some of which were inappropriate. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment. A few persistent fans from other states with solid alibis were quickly cleared as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep that didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, leaving their origin unknown. Jeffrey West's neighbors, friends, and family described the couple as happy and content, with Jeffrey aware of his wife Kat's online activities, which he viewed as harmless. However, their social circle was unaware of Kat's online persona, Kitty Cat, just as most of her followers didn't know her real identity. When asked if he had ever been violent towards Kat, Jeffrey denied it, saying he loved her too much to harm her. Despite this, the couple frequently argued, including a heated exchange on January 12th, in which Kat questioned their compatibility due to their differing personalities. Although Jeffrey remained the prime suspect based on forensic evidence and circumstantial details, his family, including his parents, daughter, and in-laws, were convinced of his innocence, adamant that he could never harm Kat. Jeffrey West was arrested and unable to post the $500,000 bail, so he remained in custody for nearly 3 years until his trial. During this time, he was offered a plea deal, which would have reduced his sentence if he admitted to killing his wife. However, he refused the deal, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, received significant media attention due to Kat's online fame. This publicity put a lot of pressure on the judges and jurors. By this point, the possibility of someone else being involved in Kat's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence pointed to Jeffrey West as the killer. They believed that in a fit of jealousy and while under the influence of alcohol, he hit his wife with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In a panic, they suggested that he then staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. Jeffrey's defense team, on the other hand, argued that Kat's death was indeed an accident. They cited her extremely high blood alcohol levels, which they believed affected her balance and coordination. Kat's mother gave a heartfelt testimony in support of her son-in-law, describing her daughter as eccentric, but emphasizing that Jeffrey loved her deeply and would never harm her. She also asked the court to consider the well-being of their granddaughter, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father as well. After deliberating, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter on January 11, 2021. Jeffrey received the maximum sentence of 13 years, including time served. It's worth noting that if he had accepted the initial plea deal, he might have already been released from prison. The case of Danilo Cavalcante. Danilo Cavalcante was born on July 3, 1989, in Esto, a municipality in the state of Maranhão, Brazil. Unlike many children, he wasn't pampered or comforted with bedtime stories. He didn't have the luxury of being escorted to school at a young age. Instead, he grew up on the streets, a common experience for children in poor Brazilian neighborhoods. The environment in Brazil's favelas was marked by extreme poverty, low living standards, and high unemployment rates. These challenging conditions created a breeding ground for street crime to flourish. When you're exposed to poverty, lack of basic necessities, and violence from a young age, your instincts for self-preservation kick in. People survive by any means necessary. Unfortunately, many individuals who grow up surrounded by violence often resort to similar behavior because it's all they know. The Brando family easily adapted to their new life, enjoying their cozy home and improved lifestyle. Deborah and her sister Sarah were extremely close, not only working together at their cleaning service, but also frequently talking on the phone throughout the day. They had achieved the peaceful and happy life they had moved to another country for. However, a chance encounter would soon alter the course of their lives forever. While spending a day off with her children at the park in 2020, Deborah met Danilo Cavalcante, a 31-year-old fellow countryman. A strong bond quickly formed between them. Danilo was very attentive to Deborah and kind to her children, which made her fall in love with him. She believed she had found a trustworthy and suitable partner. After a few months of dating, they rented a small house and started living together as a family. Initially, everything seemed perfect, but over time, Danilo's hot-tempered and emotional personality began to surface. As his relationship with Deborah deepened, he became increasingly jealous and possessive. Baseless mistrust gradually turned into complete control in their relationship. Scandals erupted repeatedly, leading to violent outbursts. Every night, Dino would get drunk and return home as a completely different, angry person. He demanded total submission from Deborah, punishing her severely in front of the children if she resisted. Despite his abuse, Deborah refused to back down and fought to protect her children. Fed up with the mistreatment, Deborah fled to her sister's home and eventually sought help from the police in the court, obtaining a restraining order to keep Cavalcante away. However, Cavalcante continued to stalk her, threatening violence if she tried to end the relationship permanently. Terrified for her life, Deborah began to investigate Danilo Cavalcante's true identity. By reaching out to acquaintances in Brazil through social media, she uncovered information about his past life and reasons for entering the United States. The truth about her lover's deception left Deborah in shock. On November 5, 2017, Danilo Cavalcante shot and fatally wounded his 20-year-old friend, Walter Jr., Moreira dos Rios in Figueroa, Brazil, over a dispute about a car repair debt. Cavalcante fled the country before authorities could arrest him due to a delay in registering the arrest warrant in the National Warrant Registry. 7 months later, in June 2018, a warrant was issued for his arrest. Cavalcante entered Puerto Rico illegally and obtained a fake ID, eventually settling in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where his sister lived. After Danilo's true identity was revealed, Deborah demanded that he leave her alone, threatening to expose his secret if he refused. However, this ultimatum proved to be a fatal mistake. On the evening of April 18, 2021, Deborah was walking with her children in front of her house, chatting quietly with an elderly neighbor while her kids played nearby. Danilo approached her, and the neighbor, who remained waiting, watched as they conversed calmly. But without warning, Danilo pulled out 2 knives and launched a brutal attack on Deborah. As she fell to the ground, he stabbed her repeatedly. Her terrified children screamed for him to stop, but Danilo was consumed by his own agony. He inflicted a total of 38 stab wounds on Deborah. A horrified neighbor attempted to stem the bleeding and provide emergency aid. Meanwhile, Deborah's daughter rushed to the neighbor's house to call for help and summon emergency services. Deborah Brendo was rushed to Pio Hospital, but sadly succumbed to her injuries. Meanwhile, Danilo Cavalcante fled Pennsylvania to evade arrest, remaining at large for several hours until he was eventually apprehended by Virginia State Police. Danilo Cavalcante was extradited to Pennsylvania and arrested in Chester County on August 16, 2023, pending trial for first-degree murder. The investigation revealed that Cavalcante had refused to accept the end of his relationship with Deborah and had subjected her to domestic violence and intimidation since 2020. During the trial, Deborah's child, who was present during the traumatic event, gave emotional testimony, recalling the horrific details of that day. The jury quickly reached a guilty verdict, sentencing Cavalcante to life in prison without parole. After the verdict, Cavalcante was taken to the Chester County Jail in Pocopson, where he awaited transfer to a federal prison. However, on August 31, 2023, at around 9 a.m., he escaped from the jail by climbing up a chimney, using the narrow space between 2 walls in the exercise yard to bypass the barbed wire fences and evade surveillance cameras. Danilo Cavalcante escaped by walking up the roof, running across it, climbing over the fence, and pushing through the barbed wire. This was a surprise, as prison officials thought they had fixed all the weaknesses in the prison system after a previous escape by Igor Bull. They had even added more barbed wire after another inmate, Igor Bolta, escaped a few months earlier. The authorities quickly launched a massive search for Danilo Cavalcante, with alerts going out everywhere. The Pennsylvania State Police Chief gave regular updates to the public through press conferences, asking residents to be vigilant and help track down the escaped prisoner. This strategy worked, and within hours, Danilo Cavalcante was spotted walking along a road about 2 miles west of the prison. On September 2nd, with the help of local residents, Authorities used surveillance cameras to spot Cavalcante in the early morning hours. They quickly set up a search perimeter around the area, securing roads and railroads to prevent his escape, and offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to his capture. The initial search focused on a 2-mile radius around the jail in Pocopson Township and Chester County, which is heavily wooded. Just days after the escape, a local resident spotted Cavalcante in a creek bed, but he managed to flee into the woods before police arrived. The search continued, and the perimeter expanded after a week. A security camera then captured Cavalcante on film at Longwood Gardens, a popular botanical garden, nearly 3 miles from the jail and just south of the initial search area. The search team has been bolstered with more personnel and advanced equipment to locate Cavalcante. As part of their efforts, helicopters flew over the search area, broadcasting a recorded plea from Cavalcante's Portuguese-speaking mother, urging him to surrender peacefully. The next morning, a security camera detected Cavalcante on a property approximately 2 miles south of the prison. In response, police established a new perimeter around the facility, Longwood Gardens, and nearby schools, which were closed during the search. As the search entered its 6th day, tension mounted in the community. With a convicted murderer on the loose, locals were anxious for answers about Cavalcante's prison escape. In response, police advised Philadelphia residents in Chester County to take precautions, including locking doors and windows, securing vehicles, and staying indoors. Pennsylvania prisoner Danilo Cavalcante, 34, escaped and sparked a massive manhunt. On September 9th, a crucial breakthrough came when Cavalcante was spotted on a video intercom call at a former colleague's home near Phoenix, about 20 miles outside the original search perimeter. Cavalcante, who was skilled at altering his appearance, had shaved and changed into new clothes, allowing him to evade detection as he traveled across the state. He stole a van from a dairy store and drove it to Phoenixville, seeking help and shelter from acquaintances. The abandoned van was found the next morning, September 10th, in a field in suburban East with an empty gas tank. As the search continued, the focus shifted to northern Chester County, and authorities updated the search perimeter. On September 11th, Cavalcante was added to the Interpol list, and the reward for information on his whereabouts was increased. That night, a local resident called emergency services to report a burglary at his garage, describing a suspect matching Cavalcante's description. The homeowner defended themselves by shooting the intruder, Cavalcante, 7 times. Despite being injured, Cavalcante managed to flee the scene and steal a .22 caliber rifle with a scope and flashlight from the home. When police arrived, they found Cavalcante's sweatshirt and shoes near the house. After identifying the perpetrator and learning the time he was now armed, police warned residents in the South Coventry neighborhood to secure their properties by locking doors, windows, and vehicles, and to stay indoors if possible for their safety. A breakthrough came around 1 a.m. on September 13th when an aircraft equipped with thermal imaging technology detected Cavalcante in the woods. However, due to poor weather conditions, police had to wait until sunrise to approach the location. Just after midnight, a security alarm went off within the search perimeter, leading authorities to the suspect's location. According to officials, the thermal imaging technology played a crucial role in tracking down Cavalcante, ultimately leading to his capture. On September 13th, around 8 a.m., the police found Danilo Cavalcante, a dangerous criminal, asleep with a stolen rifle. He attempted to flee by crawling into dense undergrowth, but a police dog named Yoda caught him by biting his head and holding him until the police arrived. According to Lieutenant Colonel George Biven, Yoda inflicted minor head injuries on Cavalcante during the capture. Biven explained that the police were able to approach quietly, which gave them the element of surprise, allowing them to capture Cavalcante without anyone getting hurt. Immediately after his capture, Cavalcante was questioned and revealed that he had survived on watermelons and creek water, traveled only at night, and even had a close call with a police officer while hiding. He had planned to steal a car and escape to Canada. Since being returned to prison, Cavalcan has been charged with multiple crimes related to his escape, including burglary, trespassing, and theft. Following Cavalcan's capture, local and state officials, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, expressed their gratitude to the numerous law enforcement officers who contributed to the search. Following Cavalcante's escape, the police set up a perimeter several miles in each direction. The Chester County Jail Board, responsible for overseeing the Chester County Jail, faced intense criticism from local residents for failing to prevent Cavalcante's escape. Residents argued that the jail had the opportunity to implement necessary security upgrades after Igor Boll's escape attempt on May 19th, and that these upgrades could have potentially prevented Cavalcante's escape, as he used the same method as Bolta. The prison has taken action against the guard who was on duty during Cavalcante's escape on September 7th, citing that the guard had a clear chance to stop Cavalcante during the escape. Following the recapture of the offender, the Chester County Jail has implemented new security measures, including the installation of a tin roof over the area where Cavalcante climbed up 2 walls to reach the roof and escape. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro emphasized that Chester County officials need to provide answers regarding the escape, considering the prison's past history. He praised the collective effort of law enforcement agencies and local residents who worked together to apprehend and bring to justice Danilo, the offender who will now face punishment and remain behind bars. The case of Karina Vetrano. On August 2nd, 2016, Karina planned to meet her father after work to spend some quality time together. Since Miss Vetrano had moved away, family gatherings had become infrequent due to everyone's busy schedules. Karina, in particular, had a lot on her plate, juggling 2 jobs. Philip picked up Karina from work and took her to his home, where they shared stories about their week. Before leaving, Karina invited her father to join her for a jog, as they often did, covering several miles together. However, Philip declined, citing severe back pain that couldn't be alleviated. He offered to call her a cab instead, but Karina preferred to jog, enjoying the pleasant weather and fresh air. Moreover, she was training for an upcoming marathon to take her mind off her recent breakup. A jog was just what she needed to clear her head. That evening, the Vetrano family said goodbye to their youngest daughter, Karina, as she left for a jog at 5:45 p.m. Her usual route took her to Spring Creek Park, a peaceful oasis in the midst of the city. However, her father, Mr. Vetrano, warned her to stick to familiar paths and avoid talking to strangers, as parts of the park were overgrown with thickets and swamps. Ignoring her father's advice, Karina wandered into a secluded, grassy area in search of solitude. Tragically, her decision proved fatal. A sudden, sharp pain struck the back of her head, and she fell to the ground. As the hours ticked by, the Vetrano family grew increasingly anxious. It had been 2 hours since Karina left, and she should have been home by now, or at least answering her parents' frantic calls. But there was only silence, and a chilling uncertainty settled over the Vetrano household. Philip's anxiety grew as he sensed something was wrong, so he sought help from his neighbor, the chief of the New York City Police Department. The two were on good terms, and the chief knew Philip wouldn't worry unnecessarily. After reporting Karina missing, the police launched a search in the park area and surrounding streets, using experienced canine units. The first 24 hours are critical in missing person cases, so they utilized all available resources before nightfall. Meanwhile, Mr. Vetrano, accompanied by a group of volunteers, searched for his daughter on his own. He thoroughly combed the park, making phone calls along the way. As dusk fell, he spotted a light in the grass and upon closer inspection, found Karina's phone. Philip hoped that maybe she had simply lost her phone and hadn't notified them. Philip, her father, pushed through underbrush towards police officers but stumbled upon a lifeless young woman, partially undressed and face down. As he turned her over, his heart sank. It was his daughter Karina. A scream erupted from his lips as the truth hit him. His darkest fears realized. The news was too much for Mr. Vetrano to bear. The police, responding to his anguished screams and cries, rushed over to restrain him, carefully pulling him away from Karina's lifeless body. They explained that the area was now a crime scene, and every detail, no matter how small, was crucial evidence. To preserve the integrity of the investigation, the officers gently but firmly asked Philip not to touch or disturb anything in the surrounding area. On his way home, Mr. Vetrano was consumed by thoughts of how to break the devastating news to his wife about their daughter's passing. Memories of the past flooded his mind, including the day their second daughter was born on July 12, 1986, in Queens. He felt immense pride in her from a young age, recalling how obedient and well-mannered she was. He vividly recalled taking her to her first day of school and her academic achievements, which led to her earning a master's degree in speech pathology from St. John's University. Karina had always dreamed of helping children, particularly those with autism. She was a multi-talented individual who loved to travel, write, and engage in sports, especially running, which was a shared passion between them, bringing them closer together. As a father, he had been protective of her relationships, wanting her to be truly loved and hoping she would build a strong family like his own, eventually giving him loving grandchildren. As Mr. Vetrano returned home, the journey felt like an eternity. He paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath to calm himself. "I need to be strong for my family," he thought. "I have to pull myself together." His wife met him at the door and immediately understood the gravity of the situation from the look on his face. Kathy cried and embraced her husband, offering comfort. As the news spread, relatives and friends struggled to come to terms with what had happened. They were shocked and disbelieving, finding it hard to accept the brutal and sudden death of her. The investigation revealed that Miss Vetrano had been the victim of a brutal attack. It was clear that she had fought back. Her clenched fists and the bruises and abrasions on her body were evidence of her resistance. Her athletic clothing was torn, and the autopsy showed that the back of her skull had been damaged by a blunt object, likely a stone. However, the cause of death was ultimately asphyxiation, with a clear mark visible on her neck. The forensic examination provided disturbing evidence that Karina Vetrano's death was a violent and intimate crime. The experts' findings supported the police's initial suspicions. Traces of earth and grass were found under the victim's fingernails, suggesting that she tried to free herself from her attacker's grip. Further examination revealed that her teeth were knocked out and cracked, indicating that she bit her attacker in self-defense. The multiple scratches on her neck indicated that she used her hands to try to pry the attacker's grip loose. Karina's determination to survive is evident in her fierce struggle. In life, Karina was a creative and thoughtful person who enjoyed writing. She had starred in a short film based on her poem Paradox in 2013 and often wrote about complex topics such as love and mortality in her blog posts. Tragically, shortly after her death, another jogger's body was found in a similar location in Princeton, Massachusetts. A woman walking alone in a secluded area suffered a similar attack. At first, it seemed like the same perpetrator as in previous cases, but geneticists compared DNA samples from the crime scenes and found no connection between the crimes. Surprisingly, the DNA samples didn't match, indicating they came from different individuals. Of particular interest was the DNA found under the victim's fingernails, on her back, and on Karina Vetrano's phone. Although the DNA was present in small amounts, experts were able to analyze it, and for a long time, it remained the only lead in the investigation, offering hope of identifying the attacker. Due to the fact that most murders are committed by someone the victim knows, the police had to consider every possibility. To aid in the investigation, the victim's father, who was the first to find his daughter's body, provided a DNA sample. Unfortunately, this procedure was conducted on the day of Karina's funeral, which was a poorly chosen time. Later, all of Karina's relatives also underwent DNA testing, but none of the results matched anything. Detectives questioned Karina's family and friends to see if anyone had a grudge against Mrs. Vetrano, but they found no one who might want to harm her. Everyone they spoke to respected and loved her. Next, they considered the possibility that the crime was committed for selfish reasons, such as meeting Karina in a secluded spot and attacking her. Unable to make progress, the investigators turned to the public for help, offering a $10,000 reward for information that could identify the perpetrator. The public responded, and detectives pursued over 250 leads, conducted 600 DNA tests, and compiled more than 1,700 reports. However, all their efforts were in vain, and it seemed that the perpetrator might not have a prior criminal record, which made the investigation even more challenging. Then on August 31, 2016, a utility worker came forward with information saying he had been in a restricted area of the park when Karina died and had seen a man emerging from the bushes who then ran north. The New York Police Department created and distributed a sketch of the suspect based on a witness's testimony. However, by December 2016, they began to consider the possibility that the person in the sketch might have been an innocent bystander who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unfortunately, the release of the sketch did not generate any new leads, and the investigation stalled once again. On December 4, 2016, the FBI joined the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death. They created a psychological profile of the perpetrator, suggesting that the individual was very familiar with the area, particularly the park where the incident occurred. This led them to believe that the attacker might have lived or still lives nearby. However, the FBI thought that the perpetrator was now avoiding the area, fearing capture. The police realized that the perpetrator had chosen the quiet, overgrown area of the park to commit the crime because it was easy to conceal his actions. Following this theory, the police screened local African American men, but this did not produce the desired result. Chanel Lewis, a young African American man who lived in a low-income housing complex in Brooklyn, about 4 or 5 miles from Spring Creek Park, did not stand out as a suspect at the time. Chanel lived with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. He had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but this didn't hold him back from graduating from a special school for students with emotional and behavioral issues. In school, Chanel was a quiet loner who was often bullied by his classmates. They would tease him about his clothes and appearance, and some girls even intimidated and punched him. Although he would sometimes try to fight back, he was no match for his tormentors. Instead, he would often smirk and walk away, earning him the nickname African Lizard. Despite this, a classmate named Danielle remembered Chanel as a smart kid with good grades who liked to share funny videos on the bus. She never saw him be mean to anyone. There were some reports that Chanel had once talked about wanting to bring a knife to school when he was in middle school. However, the head of his school later transferred, Dr. Edward Dana, said that they had no record of such threats. During Chanel's time at his school, he never got in trouble and never made any threats towards his fellow students. Chanel Lewis had a tough time as a teenager, often facing bullying and experiencing trauma. Despite this, he dreamed of working in social services to help people in need. When conflicts arose at home, he would take long walks, frequently visiting a local park. Lewis had a few minor run-ins with the police, including 2 incidents in Spring Creek and another for public urination in May 2016. In another incident, a store owner accused Lewis of loitering in his shop with a crowbar. When the police responded, they checked Lewis's ID and let him go, since he didn't have a prior record. Although this incident seemed minor at the time, it would later become crucial in the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death, which occurred in February 2017. Detective John Russo remembered a crucial detail from the investigation. a suspicious young man in a hoodie who would often lurk in the park, walking slowly and stopping in front of houses as if scouting for potential burglary targets. Although Russo lost sight of him, he didn't forget the encounter. The next day, a store owner reported an incident, and a teenager matching the description came to the police's attention. 2 months into the investigation, Russo revisited the memory of the suspicious individual, wondering if he might have witnessed something crucial, leading investigators to focus on Chanel Lewis. As they dug deeper into Lewis's background, his peculiar behavior, and a disturbing claim that he had expressed a desire to harm girls raised serious concerns and suspicions. With no other leads, the police decided to concentrate their efforts on Lewis. After Karina's death, it was discovered that Chanel Lewis had left his family's home after an argument and went to the park. When he returned, he was disheveled and had torn clothes, bruises, and abrasions. His mother asked what had happened, and Chanel claimed he was attacked. A witness's description of a man fleeing the park matched his account, which fit with the timeline of events. When investigators reviewed the medical records, they found Chanel's story plausible. However, they noticed similarities between Chanel's events and Karina Vetrano's case, raising suspicions. On February 4, 2017, Chanel voluntarily provided his DNA at the police station, which seemed unusual for someone who might be guilty. The interrogation of Lewis began the next day. He acknowledged being in the park on August 2, 2016, around 5 p.m., but specified that he was walking on dirt paths and listening to music. He admitted encountering Karina jogging with her phone. When detectives asked if something happened during their encounter, Lewis nodded and softly replied, "Yes." The response was cryptic, suggesting confusion. The investigators grew frustrated as Lewis struggled to provide a clear explanation. Finally, he stated, "I was angry, and things escalated. What happened, happened." The detectives remained skeptical, concerned that this vague admission might create doubt among jurors in a potential trial. They pressed Lewis for more information, and he eventually confessed to the crime. Chanel recalled that during the attack, his punches knocked out several of Karina's teeth and injured his own hand. The struggle lasted around 5 minutes, during which time Karina fiercely resisted, scratching and biting to avoid drawing attention. Lewis dragged her off the path and into the tall grass, where he attempted to undress and assault her. Despite being shocked, Karina continued to resist. Eventually, Chanel strangled her until she was no longer alive. When questioned about his relationship with the victim, Chanel claimed he had not known Karina before the attack and that it was a chance encounter. The motive behind the attack was unexpected and bizarre. Chanel's hatred and uncontrollable aggression were triggered by a neighborhood gang member playing loud music for hours on end. These negative emotions were then unleashed on Karina. Although the reason behind the attack was strange, investigators' confusion was resolved when DNA comparison results matched perfectly. The microscopic traces found on the victim's body and phone belonged to Chanel, leading the police and prosecutor to conclude that the case was solved and ready for court. Chanel Lewis's motive for killing Karina Vetrano seemed unlikely. However, it's possible that he had seen her before at the park with her father and had become interested in her. When she rejected him, he might have become angry and attacked her, leading to a tragic series of events. At the trial, which began on November 5, 2018, Lewis pleaded not guilty despite his earlier confessions to the authorities. His family also denied his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Lewis with murder and sexual assault, which carried a sentence of 25 years to life imprisonment. The debate about Lewis's guilt went beyond the courtroom, with the media also discussing the case. Lewis's defense team argued that his arrest was unlawful and that there was racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these allegations, stating that the investigation was conducted legally. The prosecution presented DNA evidence that linked Lewis to the crime scene. The defense argued that the evidence was contaminated due to the large number of people present at the scene including the victim's father. Nevertheless, a forensic biologist stated that the odds of the DNA belonging to someone else were incredibly low, 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecution also presented Lewis's phone records, which showed that he had searched for terms related to forgiveness and second chances in Catholicism. This raised the question, what was Lewis trying to atone for? The release of Lewis's confession video sparked further controversy, with the defense arguing that the confession was coerced and that the police had fabricated evidence. The defense suggested that the initial investigation was botched and that Lewis was made a scapegoat due to public pressure for an arrest. The jury was impressed by the defense's arguments, but ultimately they were unable to reach a verdict, leading to a mistrial on November 21, 2018. A retrial was scheduled for March 2019, and after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Lewis guilty of Karina Vetrano's murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole on July 23, 2019. Despite the defense's attempts to delay the trial, the jury found Lewis guilty. The case highlights the deep-seated prejudices and fears in society. Karina Vetrano's death serves as a grim reminder for women to be cautious. In the end, justice may have been served, but both families lost their children. The hope is that the truth was uncovered and that Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jared Bridegan. Jared Bridegan was born in 1989 in Florida to a modest family as the second of 2 sons. He and his older brother Adam were close from a young age and grew up together. Their parents were devoted members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a teenager, Jared met Mallory Bowden at church and they developed a romantic relationship. She would later call him her first true love. However, their religious beliefs discouraged cohabitation before marriage, so when Jared graduated from high school in 2007, they went their separate ways. He moved to Utah to attend college. In 2009, at the age of 20, Jared met his future first wife, Shannon Gardner, at a friend's birthday party. She was 2 years older than him and came from a wealthy family. Shannon Gardner was born in 1987 to Starling and Shelley Gardner, founders of Stampin' Up!, a successful company that produced and sold craft items. By 2010, the family business, based in Salt Lake City, generated $100 million in annual revenue. Shannon's sister, Sarah, holds a management position in the company. As a member of a wealthy family, Shannon grew up with luxuries and never had to work as a chef, despite being trained in the profession. After meeting her partner, they got engaged just a few months later and married in a lavish ceremony in Salt Lake City in early 2010, with her family covering all expenses. Their religious beliefs, which discouraged cohabitation and long engagements, influenced their quick decision to marry. After the wedding, they settled in Utah, where Shannon's parents helped them buy a comfortable home worth around $1 million. They, Shannon and Jared, traveled extensively, sharing their luxurious lifestyle on social media. They received significant financial support from Shannon's parents, who gave them around $10,000 monthly and allowed them to use their accounts freely. After Jared graduated, his in-laws gave him $100,000 to start his own business. In 2013, they had twins, Abigail and Liam, and initially moved to Connecticut. However, when Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues, they relocated to Florida, following doctors' advice that the sea air would be beneficial for his health. They bought a comfortable 2-story home near the coast in Ponte Vedra Beach. Shannon managed a popular blog, presenting herself as a devoted wife, caring mother, chef, and fitness enthusiast who loved travel and sports. She regularly visited the gym, prompting Jared to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. After moving, their marriage began to fall apart, and they soon found themselves in the midst of a scandalous divorce. Despite their efforts to put on a brave face, it was clear that their relationship was troubled. One of the main sources of tension was their differing levels of commitment to their religion. Shannon had grown disillusioned with their faith and stopped attending church, while her husband remained a devout follower. This disparity led to arguments, misunderstandings, and ultimately to the breakdown of their marriage. Shannon grew unhappy with Jared, feeling he was lazy, had gained weight, and wasn't putting enough effort into his business despite taking online courses. However, Jared eventually got a job at Microsoft and worked his way up to a senior manager role. Despite this success, the couple grew apart and started arguing frequently. Things took a turn for the worse when Jared found out about intimate messages between Shannon and her personal fitness trainer. Although Shannon denied having an affair, the trainer admitted to it in a conversation with Jared. Jared then reached out to Meller Bowden, saying his wife had become distant and emotionally attached to her trainer, but he was willing to forgive her and save their family for the sake of their children. In 2015, after almost 6 years of marriage, the couple started a bitter and dramatic divorce process. They fought over their shared assets and custody rights for their children, with Jared accusing Shannon of infidelity, which she denied, saying the marriage had simply lost its spark. Shannon retaliated by accusing Jared of being cruel and offensive. Shannon and Jared disagreed on how to divide their assets, including their home, cars, and bank accounts. Shannon claimed that most of what they had was given to her by her parents or purchased with their money, since Jared had only recently started working. Jared argued that he was entitled to at least half of their Florida home. The couple also disputed custody of their twins. Shannon accused Jared of trying to manipulate the children against her when he spent time with them, allegedly coaching them on what to say about her and recording their statements to use in court. In response, Jared accused Shannon of invading his privacy by installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and tracking his movements with a GPS device in his car. Shannon sought full custody of the children and ownership of their seaside home. She claimed Jared threatened to use their children's trust funds for himself. Jared countered by accusing Shannon of tax evasion, alleging that she worked off the books at her parents' company and received large sums of money. After their divorce, Jared and Shannon continued to argue in court for nearly 7 years, despite having shared custody of their children. During this time, they both started new families and had more kids. Jared met Christina, a co-worker at Microsoft, in 2016. At first, their relationship was professional, but they eventually became romantically involved. Christina moved to Florida to be with Jared, and they got married in the fall of 2017. They had their first child, a daughter named Bexley, in February 2019, and their son London was born in August 2021. Shannon got married again in 2018 to Mario Fernandez, a real estate businessman who is 1 year younger than her. They had a son named Michael that same year. The family lived in the same house where Shannon used to live with her first husband, Jared, which was a point of contention during their court battles. Despite the new families, the conflicts between Jared and Shannon did not subside, and they continued to file lawsuits against each other with new demands. Jared wanted to restrict Mario's access to the twins when Shannon was not around, while he wanted his new wife, Christina, to play a bigger role in raising his older children. The last court hearing between Jared and Shannon, which took place 4 months before Jared's death, was extremely tense. They made more accusations against each other and fought over their property rights. Shannon claimed that Jared was preventing her from using the family's more comfortable vehicle to transport the children because he was more concerned with embarrassing her than with their convenience and safety. After the court granted Shannon exclusive rights to the larger vehicle and ordered Jared to pay her $600 in compensation, they established a routine for their children's care. As part of this agreement, Jared picked up their twins on Wednesdays for a family dinner, which often included their younger sister Bexley. Christina sometimes joined them, but after having her baby, London, she prioritized spending time with him and avoided leaving him with babysitters. On Wednesday, February 22, 2022, Jared followed this routine, taking the children to Coastal Cafe after picking them up. After dinner and a walk, he dropped the twins back at their mother's house and headed home, taking his usual 40-minute route. This route included a stretch of road without streetlights that was quite deserted. As he drove cautiously, aware of his 3-year-old daughter sleeping in her car seat, he encountered an unexpected obstacle around 9 p.m. when the sun had set. Suddenly, in the headlights, he spotted a tire lying in his lane. Jared stopped his car to move a tire that was in the road, so he turned on his hazard lights and got out of the vehicle. That's when someone started shooting at him. The attacker was very close and shot Jared multiple times with deadly accuracy before running away. Luckily, the child who was sleeping in the car was not hurt. A person who was nearby heard the shots and carefully approached the scene. They found Jared lying on the ground, bleeding badly. They immediately called the police and ambulance, but unfortunately, it was too late to save Jared. Christina, Jared's wife, had spoken to him just minutes before the attack. He told her he had just dropped off their kids and would be home in about 15 minutes. But when 30 minutes passed, then an hour, and Jared didn't come home, Christina started to worry. She tried calling him again, but this time a police officer answered and told her what had happened. The officer asked Christina to come to the police station in Jacksonville Beach right away. The investigation at the scene revealed that a tire on the road caused Jared's vehicle to stop. After getting out to remove the tire, he was shot. Fortunately, his 3-year-old daughter, who was sleeping in the car, was unharmed, suggesting she was not the shooter's target. The absence of stolen valuables, including a wallet with cash, phone, and tablet, ruled out robbery as a motive. When questioned about potential enemies, Christina mentioned Jared's first wife, Shannon, but declined to make accusations without solid evidence. Unfortunately, there was no surveillance footage due to the lack of cameras in the area. A witness reported hearing the shots, which broke the night silence, followed by the sound of a vehicle speeding away, although nothing was visible in the darkness. Christina's hint that Shauna might be involved in the crime seemed reasonable at first, but detectives doubted she was directly responsible, given her strong alibi. She was at home with her husband, their twins, younger son, and visiting parents at the time of the incident. Instead, the police focused on reviewing nearby surveillance footage. The cameras showed an old dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident and reappearing a few minutes after the witness reported the shots. The police asked the public for help in identifying the suspicious vehicle. Jared's family made TV appeals, urging anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. The first suspect was arrested, but Shauna and her current husband Mario repeatedly denied any involvement in the murder when questioned by detectives. Shauna openly admitted that her relationship with her ex-husband was complex, but insisted she would never wish harm on the father of her children. In media interviews, she shared how her 9-year-old twins reacted to the news of their father's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam was in shock and remained silent for a long time. It's notable that neither Jared's ex-spouse nor his older children attended his funeral. This was because Christina had made it clear to Shanana that she was not welcome at the ceremony, and Shanana had countered that if she couldn't attend, the twins wouldn't go to the burial either. Almost a year after Mr. Brand's murder, the first suspect was finally arrested in January 2023. The police had been secretive about their investigation, only disclosing that it required significant resources and effort. However, their persistence paid off when the dark blue Ford F-150 was involved in an accident and fled the scene before the police arrived. This breakthrough led to an arrest. The police chief and city prosecutor announced that 62-year-old Henry Tienon, an unemployed man with a criminal record, had been charged with several crimes, including second-degree premeditated murder, participating in a conspiracy to commit murder, and setting up an ambush that obstructed the victim. Tenon, hoping to receive a lighter sentence, agreed to cooperate with law enforcement and provide information about the crime. As a result, the criminal partnership began to fall apart, and news soon spread that Tenon had been renting a house with a friend owned by Mario Fernandez. After Tenon pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against Mario, Mario was arrested. There were rumors that Shanana, Mario's wife and Tenon's former lover, was the mastermind behind the murder, allegedly motivated by her long-standing dislike for her then-husband. Despite strongly denying all accusations, Shanana eventually left town, relocating to Washington with her 3 children, just a few months after her husband's arrest. Shanana Gardner Fernandez was arrested on August 17, 2023, at her Washington apartment on the same charges as her current husband. She was extradited to Florida to stand trial with her co-defendants. Her alleged motive was to avoid sharing custody of her 2 children with her ex-husband and to gain control of disputed assets due to complicated relationships. The legal case is ongoing, and all defendants are currently facing legal proceedings. Shanana's husband, Tenon, has pleaded guilty to all charges and is cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. He is likely to face a minimum of 15 years in prison, which may be equivalent to a life sentence given his age. Mario Fernandez has partially admitted his guilt, but is refusing to testify against his wife, exercising his legal rights. Shanana Gardner Fernandez, however, denies all charges against her. Despite this, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. Shanna's children are being taken care of by their grandparents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, as well as her sister, Sarah. The case of Ben Rennick. In 1989, the Rennick family relocated to a charming farmhouse where Ben developed an interest in snakes. However, their happiness was short-lived. In September 1992, a gas leak caused an explosion at their home while they were away, forcing them to move into a trailer. Rennick family faced another challenge when Ben's mother, Kim, was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. Despite these difficulties, the close-knit family supported each other through thick and thin. In 2002, they moved into a new home that included a special room for Ben's snakes. Tragically, Kim lost her battle with cancer in 2009. Before her passing, she made her sons promise to preserve the farm and pass it down to their children. Ben's passion for snakes only grew stronger, and he eventually founded Rennick Reptiles, earning recognition worldwide. He began selling snakes globally, from the UK to Japan, and breeding them became his life's purpose. Ben, a dedicated and passionate breeder, put the needs of his snakes above financial gain. His reptile farm was a treasure trove of reptilian subspecies, featuring both common and rare species from around the world. The value of his python collection alone exceeded $1 million. Despite his professional success, Ben felt lonely and longed to start a family. That changed in 2010 when he met Lindley at a party. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and soon he introduced her to his brother Sam and his fiancée, Eli. As it turned out, both Eli and Lindley had sons from previous relationships, which helped them bond and become fast friends. Lindley seamlessly integrated into the Rennick family, and they began living together. As Ben's partner, Lindley assisted him on the snake breeding farm. They were deeply in love and functioned as a united family even before making their relationship official. In March 2012, Lindley gave birth to their daughter, Amelia, filling Ben with joy as he became a first-time father. However, their happiness was short-lived, as Ben's father, Frank Rennick, faced significant business troubles stemming from fraudulent stock transactions made to cover medical bills for his wife, Kim's treatment. Frank took his own life just one day before the FBI was scheduled to visit the farm. The investigation came to a halt as a result, and Frank's sons, Ben and Sam, were deeply affected by the loss of their father. After their parents' passing, the brothers put aside their grief to support each other. Ben inherited the family home and farm, while Sam received a large sum of money that was significantly more than the house was worth. Despite having their own families and children, the brothers decided to stay together in their childhood home, forming one large, close-knit family. Sam used his inheritance to repair the farm, and initially everything seemed fine. However, financial disagreements soon caused tension between the brothers. After their father's passing, Ben focused on his business and family. He married Lindley on April 14, 2014, making her a full member of the Rennick family. Ben and Lindley opened a second business, a spa called Essentia Spa Inc., which Lindley managed. However, the spa struggled financially, leading to frequent arguments between Ben and Lindley about money. Despite her best efforts, Lindley was unable to generate enough revenue to cover the spa's expenses. At the same time, Sam and his wife struggled financially. Ben granted them permission to sell some of the furniture in the house, but Lindley strongly disagreed with this decision, which caused a rift between the two families and ultimately led to an irreparable breakdown in their relationship. Ben planned to sell some rare reptiles to improve his family's finances, but the deal fell through because of a tragic event that occurred on the farm on June 8, 2017. On that day, Lindley found her husband Ben lying in a pool of blood on the floor of one of the farm's barns. She called her brother-in-law Sam for help and reported the emergency, saying she had found Ben unconscious. During the call, Lindley abruptly dropped the phone and ran outside. Sam continued talking to the emergency operator and sadly confirmed that his brother had died. Sam suspected that a snake might be responsible for the incident. The Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were eventually called to the snake breeding facility, a place they hadn't visited in a long time. However, they were hesitant to enter the farm, fearing they would encounter over 3,000 snakes while investigating the scene where Ben's body lay in blood. Coroner Dave Colbert approached the scene with caution, aware of the possibility of a deadly viper attack. However, upon closer inspection, he found a shell casing on a shelf, indicating a far more sinister scenario. Multiple shell casings were discovered near the body, but no weapon was found. The autopsy revealed that Ben had been shot multiple times in the back and head. Despite this, none of the relatives reported hearing any shots or seeing the attacker. Sam and Lindley, Ben's relatives, were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. During the interview, Lindley suggested that Sam might have been involved in Ben's death, citing a potential motive. Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was opposed. To clear his name, Sam agreed to take a lie detector test, which he passed. With no evidence to hold them, the police released Lindley and Sam. The investigation continued, exploring various theories about who might have wanted Ben Rennick dead. The police initially suspected that Ben Rennick's death might be linked to robbery, but this theory was quickly ruled out because none of the rare snakes in the house were taken and no valuables were missing. In the days following Ben's death, the police questioned Lindley, Ben's wife, and tested her hands and clothing for signs of gunpowder residue. However, the test results came back negative. After Ben's funeral, Lindley cut off all contact with her brothers-in-law, Sam and Eli, and began making moves to sell her husband's business and claim a $1 million life insurance payout. Her plan was to use the insurance money to pay off the mortgage on the Rennick family home, which she intended to sell for $740,000. When Sam and Eli found out about Lindley's quick insurance claim and her plans to sell the house, they became suspicious and notified the authorities. Sam, in particular, suspected that his brother's wife might be involved in Ben's death and shared his concerns with the investigators. As a result, Lindley was questioned again by the police, during which she revealed that she had a complicated relationship with Ben and had been secretly meeting with a man named Eric. Although Eric had an alibi, it seemed suspicious to the investigators. Lindley made some stunning confessions. Approximately 3 years into her officially recognized marriage, she admitted to having had affairs with at least 2 different men. Furthermore, Text messages exchanged between the couples imply that Ben had been suspicious of his wife's infidelity, which had been causing significant tension in their relationship lately. On October 5, 2017, Lindley underwent a polygraph test conducted by the Missouri State Highway Patrol, but the results indicated deception. While the test raised suspicions, it did not provide sufficient concrete evidence to directly implicate her in Ben's murder, so she was released from custody. The investigation persisted, albeit at a slower pace. It was later discovered that Lindley had attempted to kill Ben a month before his death. She had fabricated a story about Ben being abusive and shared it with a coworker at a spa salon, gaining their sympathy and assistance. The coworker helped Lindley plot to kill Ben by making him a protein shake laced with 15 Percocet pills. Unbeknownst to Ben, he drank the shake and fell severely ill, but survived, unaware that he had been poisoned. Lindley was questioned by investigators 6 times. A major breakthrough came on January 14, 2012, when a witness from a state prison came forward claiming to have information about Ben's death. The witness, Brandon Blackwell, told investigators that Lindley had shot Ben and conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon said he dated Lindley, who was married to Ben, and they had a child together about 1.5 years after Ben's death. However, by 2019, they had broken up. Brandon claimed that Lindley told him she plotted with her coworker Ashley Shaw and her ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey to kill Ben. Lindley and Michael were arrested for Ben's murder, but they blamed each other for the crime. Michael said that on the day of the murder, Lindley asked him to pose as a buyer at the farm, and he was supposed to shoot Ben while wearing gloves. However, he couldn't bring himself to do it. According to Michael, Lindley then took the gun and shot Ben herself. The investigation into Ben's death took 3 years. On January 16, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Lindley, Michael, and Ashley. Ashley was given immunity in exchange for her cooperation and testified against Lindley, her former boss at the spa salon. Ashley said that Lindley had complained about Ben, claiming he was abusive and belittling, and convinced her to help with a plan to kill him. Lindley feared that if she divorced Ben, he would gain custody of their children, so she plotted to kill him by poisoning him with a lethal cocktail. When questioned, Lindley and her accomplice Michael accused each other of Ben's murder. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey went on trial in Ain County. His lawyers hoped to reduce his sentence by revealing the murder weapon, which would lead to a second-degree murder charge. Although Michael had the gun, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it to lessen his sentence. However, he made a deal with the prosecution, revealing the location of the murder weapon. In exchange, he received a life sentence for second-degree murder, without a trial, on January 3, 2021. This meant Michael Humphrey would be imprisoned for life, with the possibility of parole. The trial of Lindley Rennick started on December 6, 2021, for the shooting death of her husband Ben Rennick on June 8, 2017, at his snake breeding facility in New Florence. According to court documents, the plot to kill Ben originated at Lindley's spa salon. The probable cause statement revealed that Ben knew about Lindley's financial troubles and her fear that he might take their children away, leading her to falsely claim domestic abuse. The first attempt on Ben's life involved a protein shake laced with drugs, which was confirmed by search warrants for their Facebook accounts. These searches also showed that Ben was aware of Lindley's financial issues. In court, the events of the day Ben was killed were reconstructed through cross-examination. On that day, Michael Humphrey picked up Lindley from the spa salon, while Shaw sent deceptive text messages from Lindley's phone, hiding their true location and trying to mislead the investigation, according to court documents. Humphrey tried to kill Ben, but couldn't finish the job, so he asked Lindley to do it for him after firing some shots. In his hurry, Humphrey picked up most of the bullet casings, but missed a few. After returning to the spa, Lindley took a shower, which helped remove any gunpowder residue from her hands and clothes. Humphrey also got rid of Lindley's clothing to avoid raising suspicion. During the trial, defense attorney Catherine Barrere tried to portray Lindley as a victim of domestic violence by highlighting her personal history, family, education, and her relationship with ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey. However, no evidence supported this claim, weakening the defense's argument. Lindley was involved with Michael Humphrey, who was part of a group that plotted to kill Ben. Lindley described their relationship as codependent, with Humphrey dealing drugs and her being addicted. She broke up with Humphrey in 2010, but reconnected with him about a month before Ben's murder. Lindley Rennick denied planning to kill her husband Ben, including the alleged attempt to poison him with a protein shake. At the time, their spa business was failing, and they were experiencing financial and marital problems. Lindley admitted to having affairs with multiple men, which she deeply regretted. When she considered divorce, she didn't know who to turn to, given her father's experience with divorce and his strong views on the matter. She reconnected with an old boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, seeking support to discuss divorce with Ben. In court, Lindley confessed to intentionally hiding Michael's involvement in Ben's death due to their troubled marriage, which included disagreements, physical and sexual abuse, and the stress of Ben's snake breeding business. She was afraid of Ben and worried about his reaction when she would bring up divorce. On June 8, 2017, Lindley brought Michael to their farm, claiming she only wanted to discuss divorce, not harm Ben. She took out the trash, then saw Michael and Ben washing their hands in the nursery. She didn't hear their conversation, focusing on how to initiate the divorce discussion. Lindley described seeing Michael draw a gun and shoot Ben, after which she screamed, ran outside, and heard more shots. Everything seemed numb, and she stared at the trees as Michael came to her and pushed her towards the car. When she returned to the snake breeding facility and saw Ben's body, reality hit her. She called Ben's brother, Sam, and they checked Ben's pulse and breathing, hoping he might still be alive. Lindley regretted not telling the police about her presence at the facility with Michael, which led to suspicion and investigation. Although there was a $1 million life insurance policy, Lindley waived her rights to the money. She received some financial compensation from a trust set up by Ben's father, which benefited Ben and their children, not herself. Lindley shared her story with her then-boyfriend Brandon Blackwell, but their relationship ended after she had his child during the trial. She expressed remorse for her continuous deception, saying she was trying to escape the truth of what happened and never wanted her husband's death. Lindley Rennick's defense team did not request a new trial or appeal her conviction. Instead, she filed a lawsuit against Blackwell, accusing him of making false statements about her role in her husband's death. During the trial, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Lindley Rennick's credibility, pointing out inconsistencies in her story. He asked why she didn't check on her husband after hearing gunshots, didn't call 911, sent friendly messages to Blackwell and Humphrey after the shooting, and continued to lie as emergency responders arrived. Lindley Rennick admitted to suggesting her brother-in-law as a suspect, and Zellner portrayed her as a calculating but clumsy mastermind. He accused her of being heartless for accusing the victim's brother. On December 9, 2021, Lindley Rennick was found guilty of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She broke down during sentencing, receiving 13 years for murder and 3 years for armed criminal action. In January, the judge sentenced her to a total of 16 years. The victim's family, including Sam Rennick, was outraged, believing Lindley and her co-conspirator deserved life imprisonment. Sam Rennick expressed his disappointment, shocked that his son's life was valued at only 13 years. He felt that Ben's death had destroyed their relationship. However, Ben Rennick's legacy lives on. The reptile community was shaken by his death and decided to honor him by naming a new snake species after him. They collected donations to support his family. The case of Amanda Blackburn. Amanda Grace Buers was born on July 31, 1987, in Muskegon, Michigan. Her family later moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, and then to Elkhart in 1995. Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006 and went on to earn an associate's degree from Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida in 2008. Amanda was raised in a deeply devout Christian family, where her father served as the lead pastor of First Baptist Church in Elkhart, Indiana. From a young age, she was deeply committed to her faith and had memorized many church sermons. Unlike her peers, who were eager to explore the world and experience adult life, Amanda's desire was to serve Jesus. Amanda was a kind and gentle soul, with a slender build, blonde hair, and a sincere smile. Her thoughts and heart were pure, and she consistently showed love and compassion towards others. As a teenager, Amanda made a vow of chastity, promising not to kiss a man until she was married, and she remained true to this commitment. Amanda's heart raced when she met the love of her life, Davy Blackburn. A native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Davy was a devoted Christian who studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University. The two were introduced on a blind date at a Christian concert featuring the band Hawk Nelson, arranged by Amanda's sister and Davy's best friend. Despite attending different colleges, they spent every vacation together, cultivating a deep and innocent connection. Their relationship was free from physical attraction, focusing instead on shared values and faith. They took leisurely walks, discussed their thoughts and favorite Bible passages, and laughed together, finding joy in simple things. On one occasion, before returning to school, they engaged in a playful milkshake drinking contest, which Amanda lost. In a light-hearted moment, Davy teased her, calling her a milk girl. As he looked at her, he knew he had found the woman he wanted to marry. They maintained a long-distance relationship for a long time, relying heavily on messaging apps, phone calls, and extended conversations during their vacations together. They were deeply committed to building a strong and healthy partnership, and to that end, they sought the guidance of a psychologist to learn effective communication strategies. Amanda and Davy Blackburn got married on August 1, 2008. After the ceremony, Davy told friends that he felt a special connection with Amanda, which he believed was part of God's plan. For 4 years, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina, where Davy worked as an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Noble. However, Davy felt restless and wanted to do more. He suggested to Amanda that they move to Indianapolis to start a new church focused on youth ministry. Amanda was hesitant to leave her family and friends behind, and she struggled with the decision. Eventually, she agreed to move after Davy convinced her that God had big plans for them. In 2012, the Blackburns relocated from South Carolina to Indianapolis to establish an independent church on the north side, targeting young people. They created weekly videos on their website, offering advice on relationships, conflict resolution, and intimate relationships according to the Bible. In 2014, the Blackburn family welcomed their first child, Weston. They lived a happy and comfortable life in a quiet neighborhood, with Davy serving as a popular pastor at a church frequented by many young people. The family was united and content. Tragedy struck on November 10, 2015, when Amanda, who was pregnant at the time, was rushed to the hospital after an ambulance was called to their home. Despite efforts to save her, she died the next day, along with their unborn baby girl, Evie Grace. The news of Amanda's passing sparked an outpouring of sympathy and prayers on social media, with friends, family, and strangers sharing their condolences. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially declared deceased, Davy released a statement honoring her legacy, saying that she dedicated her life to loving and serving those around her. Amanda Blackburn dedicated her life to spreading the message of Jesus Christ and helping others find salvation. Through her death and legacy, even more people will come to know Christ. I'm certain she wants me to continue the work we started in Indianapolis. Dave Blackburn described the murder of his pregnant wife Amanda as a devastating blow to their Orthodox community and a shock to the entire state. The public demanded justice, calling for the perpetrator to be caught and punished. In his first interview, Dave recounted finding Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor, partially naked and surrounded by blood. Dave explained to investigators that he had left the house around 6 a.m. to work out at the fitness center, leaving the door unlocked, as he often did. If he had locked the door, it's possible the criminals might not have entered the house so easily, giving Amanda time to call for help. Amanda suffered 3 gunshot wounds, including one to the head during the attack. Despite a swift investigation, no arrests were made in the days immediately following the crime. The police quickly cleared Amanda's husband, Davy Blackburn, of any involvement in the brutal incident. According to trial transcripts, Davy Blackburn's testimony was supported by that of Scott Floyd, the first emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department to arrive at the scene. Floyd stated that when they arrived at the house in response to Davy's 911 call, Davy was standing at the end of the driveway with blood on his hands. Scott stated that Davy described his wife Amanda as lying on the floor, unresponsive. Davy claimed to have discovered her after returning home from the gym around 7:30 a.m. and finishing a phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner. He entered his home at 8:10 a.m. and called emergency services at 8:22 a.m., thinking Amanda was sick or unconscious. However, it's unclear why it took him 12 minutes to make the call and why he didn't notice the brain matter nearby. An emergency room doctor testified that the blood on her head was coagulated, suggesting the gunshot wound occurred around 2 hours earlier. Davy claimed to have only called his father after calling 911. Authorities verified his alibi using surveillance footage from the gym, and he was not considered a suspect. The autopsy revealed Amanda suffered multiple gunshot wounds and signs of a struggle. The investigation included reviewing CCTV footage and interviewing neighbors, one of whom reported hearing gunshots 35 minutes after Davy left the house. The initial theory was robbery, given the missing bank cards and MacBook bag. Police discovered a series of burglaries in the area, including one at a nearby home where a woman reported her phone, laptop, and keys stolen. Another home on Sunnyfield Court was burgled, with several items missing, including a Tiffany pearl necklace and a pink women's sweater. 5 minutes later, Davy reported a burglary at his own home. Police looked for connections between the crimes and released images of possible suspects. Davy was confident in the police's efforts to catch his wife's killer, and investigators were hopeful that promising leads would soon lead to the perpetrator. The key clues that helped track down the suspects were a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. These were found in a stolen Chrysler Sebring, recovered near the Blackburns' home. The debit card on the receipt matched one of Amanda's stolen cards. The investigation into the crime led to a crucial discovery when a search warrant was obtained to review the ATM camera footage. The video showed the driver covering his face with a stolen pink sweater. By combining DNA testing, surveillance footage, and eyewitness accounts, the police were able to identify the suspects. DNA analysis of the sweater revealed that J.N. Watson was one of the individuals involved. This identification was a significant milestone in the case. Further investigation involved obtaining cell phone records. Watson's phone number was already in the database due to a previous burglary conviction for which he was on parole. The records of Diana Gordon's cell phone were also obtained. The data showed that both Watson's and Gordon's phones were in the vicinity of the crime scene when the incident occurred. Moreover, the phone records indicated that Gordon and Watson were near the Chase Bank, where Amanda's debit card was used on the day of the murder. The final piece of evidence fell into place with the identification of Larry Taylor. By examining surveillance footage in the area, the police were able to identify Taylor's phone number and subsequently trace his address. Following the incident, a new development emerged when a gun was reportedly found near the Blackburn home. A man handed the gun over to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming to have discovered it outside the home. Forensic experts analyzed the gun, and after 2 weeks of investigation, police arrested 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old Jayan Watson for Amanda Blackburn's murder. A third suspect, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, was taken into custody for a parole violation, but he was not charged with a felony since he did not enter the Blackburn home. Once the crime lab results were in, it was confirmed that the gun found near the victim's home was the murder weapon. All 3 suspects were apprehended. When questioned, Larry Taylor admitted to shooting the woman twice because she allegedly jumped on him and he feared she would scratch him. He then shot her in the back of the head as she lay on the ground and proceeded to watch her bleed to death. A criminal trio consisting of Taylor, Watson, and Gordon targeted the Blackburn house on November 10th with the intention of stealing money. The husband had left the front door unlocked when he went to the gym, making it an easy target. Upon entering, they confronted Amanda and Taylor, hit her with a gun to subdue her. Watson and Gordon, feeling uneasy, decided to leave and use the stolen bank cards to withdraw cash from an ATM. They attempted to get $500 from one ATM, but were unsuccessful, and then managed to withdraw $1,400 from another. Their actions were caught on CCTV. The duo returned to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor, but in their absence, Amanda regained consciousness and fought back against her attacker. Taylor tackled her to the ground and later admitted to shooting her. After the crime, Taylor placed the stolen debit cards in an accomplice's car. The Blackburn home was the third target of the day for the trio. Earlier, they had broken into a house where the resident was asleep, stealing a laptop, wallet, and car. They were caught on camera, but ignored it and moved on. Their next target was another home, which they broke into through a patio window, stealing 4 TVs, a laptop, jewelry, and some unusual items, including a bag of oranges and a pink sweater that would eventually help the police identify them. Court documents revealed the evidence gathered by police against the suspects. The most crucial piece of evidence was Jayan Watson's DNA, found on a pink sweater used to cover his face during a surveillance video. The sweater was stolen during the second burglary, and Watson used it to conceal his identity while trying to withdraw cash with Amanda Blackburn's stolen bank card. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Watson and Diana Gordon cooperated with the investigation. Larry Taylor, however, waived his right to remain silent and admitted to being near the burglary scene. Although he claimed to be confused, he could not provide a clear alibi. The county prosecutor formally filed charges against the suspects. Larry Taylor faces 13 charges, including felony murder for knowingly killing Amanda Blackburn. Jayan Watson is charged with a felony, and both he and Taylor face multiple counts of burglary, robbery, and theft. Diana Gordon, already in custody for a parole violation, also faces burglary charges. A fourth individual was aware of the robberies, burglaries, and other crimes but did not participate. After questioning, this person was released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit collaborated with the Gang Unit and federal marshals to apprehend Taylor. Police Chief Rick Height commended the cooperative efforts that led to Taylor's arrest, praising the detectives who worked tirelessly to solve the city's murders without rest. Thanks to Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry, justice was served, partly due to the victim's pregnancy. Prosecutors considered filing additional charges related to the fetus, although they found no evidence to support rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial, held in December 2021, was cut short when it was discovered that a juror had discussed the case with fellow jurors. This led to a mistrial. The second trial, held in October 2022, featured a more rigorous jury selection process. Over 100 potential jurors were called and had to fill out a 16-page questionnaire to assess their ability to reach a fair verdict. Larry Joe Taylor was sentenced to 86 years in the Indiana State Correctional Institution for Amanda Blackburn's murder and additional burglary charges. Diana Gordon and Jayan Watson agreed to plea deals and testified against Larry Taylor in court, receiving sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Both Watson and Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. In Indiana, a murder conviction can lead to 45 to 60 years in prison or even life imprisonment or the death penalty. Prosecutors sought to enhance Larry Taylor's sentence by 20 years due to the victim's pregnancy during the alleged crime. Davy Blackburn, Amanda's husband and a pastor, expressed relief that those responsible for her murder were caught and would not harm anyone else. Amanda's death had a significant impact, with thousands attending her funeral, including Governor Mike Pence. A donation page was set up to cover funeral and medical expenses. Davy Blackburn chose to forgive Amanda's killers, stating, "I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope." Amanda's case garnered national and international media attention. After Amanda's death, Davy Blackburn transitioned from an unhappy husband to a popular blogger, capitalizing on his tragedy. He created podcasts and videos, sharing his experiences and pain. He became famous and wealthy, receiving an insurance payout and buying a new home. The case of Christy Sean. Christy Maria Sean Cody was born on September 3, 1976, in Madrid, Spain, to American military parents. Due to her father's duties as a U.S. Air Force soldier, the family frequently relocated, following him to various European countries before eventually returning to the United States. Sean began her education in New Orleans, Louisiana, but the family soon moved to Texas, then Illinois, and later spent several years in Latin American countries. Although this nomadic lifestyle presented challenges, it also allowed her to develop valuable skills, such as speaking multiple languages and experiencing different cultures. However, during her teenage years, Sean struggled to adjust to new environments, make friends, and settle into new social circles. Just as she would start to feel comfortable, the family would move again, requiring her to adapt to new schools and peer groups. Despite these challenges, Sean developed strong communication skills, which enabled her to quickly find common ground with diverse people. She was known for being a sweet, sociable, and charming young woman. In addition to her social skills, Sean was also actively involved in sports from an early age, participating in gymnastics, swimming, and kickboxing classes for a time. When Christy finished school, her family moved to Beloit, Mississippi, where her father had retired from the military. It was here that she formed lasting friendships and discovered a passion for cooking. She experimented with various recipes, honing her culinary skills and earning praise for her creations. This led her to pursue formal culinary training, completing courses to further develop her talent. While her parents expected her to become a professional chef, Christy also discovered an aptitude for acting. She enrolled in an acting academy in Los Angeles, seizing every opportunity that came her way. She appeared in commercials, performed on stage, and worked as an extra or stunt performer in several high-profile productions. After graduating from the academy in 2000, Christy had yet to land a significant role. Despite her talents and striking appearance, she shifted her focus to her culinary skills and sports, turning these passions into a successful business. Christy is a strong advocate for a healthy lifestyle, offering advice on proper nutrition and developing her own exercise routines to maintain physical fitness. About a year after her TV debut, she founded a successful catering company that provides banquet services and retails prepared culinary products. Her business stands out for its focus on healthy eating and features her own original recipes. Christy's next goal is to start her own farm, which will grow healthy and environmentally friendly produce. This will enable her to expand her catering business while promoting sustainable practices. In addition, she conducts online courses on proper nutrition and develops other projects, further establishing herself as a prominent figure in the culinary industry. In 2012, Christy had a fateful encounter on TV when she met Joseph Timothy Cody, a casting director known as JT, at a studio in Los Angeles. At the time, Christy was auditioning for a culinary show, and JT was responsible for selecting participants and actors for various high-rated projects. There was an instant connection between them. Despite being nearly 7 years older than Christy and in the process of getting a divorce, JT was captivated by her beauty and charisma. He began to pursue her, and Christy was receptive to his advances. Soon, they started a romantic relationship. Joseph and his partner Christy shared a dream of building a life together in North Carolina. They left Los Angeles, selling their businesses and home, and invested in a large plot of land in Leicester. They bought a spacious house and nearly 1-acre property where Christy focused on her blog about healthy nutrition and lifestyle, and Joseph continued to work with TV channels remotely. Their relationship was filled with harmony, and in August 2014, they had a grand wedding attended by hundreds of guests. 3 months later, they were overjoyed to discover they were expecting their first child. They learned they were having a daughter during a routine ultrasound examination and chose to name her Skylar. Everything seemed perfect, but their happiness was short-lived. Christy's mother, who lived out of state, regularly called her to update on her life. However, on March 13, 2015, Christy's mother couldn't reach her, but didn't think much of it. The next day, neither Christy nor Joseph answered their phones. By March 15th, both phones were turned off, which alarmed Christy's mother. She asked a close friend, Cecily, who lived nearby, to check on the couple. Cecily found the cars parked outside, but the front door was locked, and no one responded to her knocks and shouts. She saw the couple's dogs locked in a room through a window and noticed the back door lock had been broken. She immediately called Christy's mother, who then contacted the police. The responding officers found signs of a break-in at the back door and disarray inside the house. Valuables were stolen, including a jewelry box and a breached safe in the bedroom. However, there was no evidence of a struggle, bloodshed, or forced detention. The perpetrator seemed to have taken great care to leave no fingerprints or DNA traces. The relatives held out hope that Joseph and Christy might still be alive, but experienced officers were not optimistic. The investigation struggled to make progress, with no significant clues or evidence found. The missing couple appeared to have no enemies, making it difficult to piece together what had happened. The police decided to question the neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual recently. A crucial detail emerged during the investigation into the disappearance of Christy and Joseph Cody. A neighbor reported seeing another local resident, later identified as 36-year-old Robert Jason Owens, throwing a large bundle into a trash bin near the Cody's home on the morning of March 15th. Although the trash had already been taken to the dump, the police wanted to speak with Owens, who was a handyman and friend of the couple. Upon questioning, Owens initially denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claimed ignorance about the bundle. However, the situation changed dramatically when the bundle was found at the landfill, containing items from the missing couple's home, including Owens' fingerprints and DNA traces on partially burnt clothing stained with blood. A search of Owens' home revealed charred human skeletal remains in his wood stove, incriminating him in the brutal elimination of his neighbor and his pregnant wife. Despite his initial denials, Owens eventually confessed to the crime after several hours of questioning. According to Owens, the incident occurred on the evening of March 12th, when he visited the Cody's home after getting stuck in the mud. He claimed that while trying to get his car out, he accidentally struck and ran over the couple while sitting in the driver's seat. Panicked, he decided not to call the police and instead covered up the incident. Owens claimed that he broke into the Cody's house, took blankets to move the bodies, and then dismembered them in his own bathroom. He proceeded to burn the body parts in his stove, but packed the blood-soaked clothing, blankets, and footwear into a trash bag and disposed of them in a dumpster. The police were shocked by Owens' cruel actions and eerie calmness when recounting the events. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bone fragments found in Owens's stove belonged to the missing couple. Robert, a man with no family and little contact with relatives, moved to Leicester in 2000 after buying land and building a house. However, his name became linked to a 15-year-old unsolved crime in Asheville, where he previously lived. The crime involved his close friend Zeb Wayne Quinn, who vanished mysteriously at the age of 18. Zeb and Robert had been friends since school and lived nearby. Zeb was undergoing military training and worked part-time at Walmart. On January 2, 2000, Zeb finished his shift and met with Robert, planning to drive to Leicester to buy a new car. However, he never returned home. A few days later, Zeb's car was found parked in another part of town with its headlights on and a heart drawn on the window with red lipstick. The car had damage and scratches with paint particles from another vehicle. Robert, who was the last person to see Zeb, told an implausible story. According to Robert, Zeb asked him to stop the car to make a phone call, saying he received an urgent message on his pager. Zeb drove off to a gas station, returned 10 minutes later looking frantic, and changed their plans. He then drove off in an unknown direction, hitting Robert's car in the process. However, Robert's car also had damage with paint particles from Zeb's car, raising suspicions about his involvement in Zeb's disappearance. Zeb Quinn had been romantically involved with Misty Taylor, who previously dated Wesley Smith. Smith had threatened Zeb, warning him to stay away from Misty or face harm. Although Zeb, Smith, and Owens were questioned, they were released due to lack of evidence. Misty and Smith had alibis, but Robert did not. A large sum of money Zeb had been carrying to buy a car vanished from his car and pager. The investigation suggested that Zeb never received a mysterious message, if any. A strange incident occurred the day after Zeb's disappearance. Someone claiming to be Zeb called Walmart, saying he would be absent from work for a few days due to illness. However, the colleague who answered the call thought the voice sounded unfamiliar, not like Zeb's. The call was traced back to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. When questioned, Owens unexpectedly claimed he made the call at his friend's request the night before Zeb disappeared. Despite further investigation, no new evidence or witnesses were found, and the case remains unsolved, with Zeb Quinn still listed as missing. 15 years after the events, Owens was questioned again, suspected of being involved in his friend Zeb Quinn's disappearance. The case was reopened in June 2015, and the investigation resumed. Although Owens stuck to his original story, the police searched his property thoroughly and found something unusual. In a concrete slab on Owens' property, they discovered a hidden cavity containing small, heavily charred human bone fragments. Unfortunately, the remains were too damaged for DNA analysis, so it was impossible to confirm whether they belonged to Quinn. A neighbor's statement added another surprising detail. An elderly man recalled an incident from January 2000 when Owens had just bought the land and was building his house. One evening, Owens started a fire that emitted a sickly sweet, nauseating smell, which the neighbor found unbearable due to the wind blowing the stench in his direction. After covering the fire pit with concrete, which raised suspicions, Robert Owens claimed he intended to build a small fountain, but never did. 15 years later, the police arrived at the property, and Owens confessed to a crime, offering a new explanation. He stated that his uncle, Walter Owens, had murdered Misty's boyfriend, Zeb, at the request of Wesley Smith, who was still in love with Misty. Robert claimed he was unaware of the plan at the time and was only asked by his uncle to lure Zeb to a secluded area. According to Robert, his uncle had ordered them to stop their cars in a wooded area and then had Zeb exit his vehicle. Walter then shot Zeb silently and instructed Robert to help dismember and package the body. The body was burned on Robert's property that night and encased in concrete. However, it was not possible to question Walter Owens, as he had died several years prior to Robert's confession. The police found no evidence at the alleged crime scene, and Robert's story seemed unconvincing. He was charged with multiple crimes, including first-degree murder, murder of an unborn child, dismemberment, concealment of evidence, burglary, and robbery, which could have led to the death penalty. The defendant's lawyer argued that their client's depression and mental disorders, which required powerful medication, contributed to their actions. This defense strategy could have led to the defendant being found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of prison. However, the prosecution and the victim's relatives were not satisfied with this possibility. Meanwhile, the investigation into Quinn's case was ongoing, which could have also resulted in the defendant avoiding punishment. In 2017, the defendant accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to the murders of the Codes in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. As a result, they were convicted of second-degree manslaughter, as well as several other crimes including dismemberment, incineration of bodies, burglary, and robbery. Owens was sentenced to 59 years in prison. In 2022, he reached another plea deal with authorities, this time related to Quinn's case. Although he only admitted to being an accomplice to murder and helping to conceal evidence, he received an additional 12-year sentence, effectively extending his life sentence. After sentencing, Owens spoke to the court, asking the families of his victims for forgiveness. Despite this, he maintained his innocence, blaming an accident and his mental disorder, which he claimed was exacerbated by strong medication. However, the families of Christe and Joseph Coed, as well as Quinn's family, remained unconvinced. They rejected the notion of unintentional murder, believing that Owens acted deliberately and with selfish motives in both cases.